Yes, I am in a relationship. I've been in a relationship for a while now. I met my girlfriend in 2010, so we've been together for about 12 years. And another piece of information people might not know is I actually have a daughter. So I'm a father, which is absolutely amazing. I told everybody on my Patreon page that I'm in a relationship. I revealed that last week, and I encouraged them to ask me questions. And we got heaps of questions. People wanted to know. So I charged my buddy Matt. How you doing, Matt?
I'm well. Glad to be here.
To go through all of those questions, to pick out the best ones, and to ask me. So let's get into it. Matt, what do people want to know about my relationship?
Very good. First question is, how did you two meet?
We met at university. When I first saw her, I was like, oh, I'm going to make that girl my girlfriend. Like, I was, the attraction was instantaneous. I was like into my pickup artist kind of stuff back then. So I was very, very direct with my intention. Succeeded in making her my girlfriend. And I'd say after about 3 or 4 months of dating, where we're sort of figuring things out between each other, I pretty much knew from then. I'm like, yes, this is the girl for me. This is definitely going to be the relationship, which was a relief because I've been doing pickup artist, like casual stuff for a couple of years, and it was getting pretty boring. I was ready for a long-term relationship.
How about your daughter? How old is she?
I won't give her exact age, but she's young. She's a toddler.
Very good. And was she planned or was she a happy accident?
Oh, she was planned. She's many years in the making. I wanted to have children early, like really early. And so when I got together with my girlfriend, I was 22 and she was just 20. But like in the first couple of dates, I was letting her know, you should know, I want to have children early. Like my plan is to move to the country, get a plot of land, grow our own vegetables and have children. That's exactly what I want to do. She's like, oh, wow. Like that's your timeline. I don't think she'd probably heard that from a lot of like 22-year-old guys who are hitting on her. But it just took a while. Like financially, I wanted to be like well set up. I also wanted to make sure that I had like time to spend with her. I wanted to enjoy her childhood. And then also like conceiving just took like a little bit of time. So yeah, she was definitely planned, but I'd say she's like overdue.
Wow, I wish I could. I want to ask follow-up questions, but I'm going to keep to what we got here. Your Patreon audience has asked a lot of good ones. What does she do for a living, your girlfriend? Does she work, or if not, does she want to?
When I first met her, she was a dance and gym instructor. And she was also doing freelance work, creating costumes. Like her degree was in fashion and artistic. It was like a fine arts degree with a focus on fashion. And she was really good at it. She won like national awards and stuff like that. She was very talented, but she came to really dislike the fashion industry. She thought it was quite vapid. She got a lot more into like costume design that allowed her to express her creativity a lot more. But she sort of moved on from all of that now. Just a quick disclaimer, I apologize to everybody. I've got COVID at the moment. I'm in recovery, but if I cough or if my throat sounds weird, that's what I've got going on. More recently, though, she's been studying to become a psychologist, probably no surprise for people there. So she's in her 6th year of studying. She's in master's. She's doing absolutely amazing at it. She got first class honors, like way at the top of her class. She's a very intelligent woman. So she's just got to finish her master's. And then here in Australia, she has to do a 1-year internship, and then she's going to open up her private practice and become a therapist.
Amazing. What's the biggest personality difference between you two?
I mean, we're pretty similar. Like she's more similar to me than anybody else, and that's the process of pair bonding, because we've had 12 years to kind of grow around each other. So the differences are mostly like traditionally like masculine, feminine ones, so I'm much more open to taking risks than she is. Like I feel a little bit panicked, I think, when things stay the same too much. I want novelty, I want excitement, I want adventure. Whereas she's pretty happy, staying where it's kind of safe and comfortable. Having said that, I've dragged her around the world on all kinds of like travel trips, and she always enjoys it. But I think she wouldn't do that. And she said it to me, she wouldn't go on those trips if it wasn't for me planning it, and figuring out where to go. And then she's quite happy to just sort of come along on my adventure. But it's part of that makes it like okay and palatable for her. Other things like artistically, I think I like more like landscape kind of paintings, and she's more like small details. So like I like big views, whereas she's like Nestle little gardens. And I can appreciate her style, but I think that's just a masculine feminine difference. We have a difference in like some TV. Like I like adult cartoons. I like shock humor. I like really intense, hardcore kind of stuff. Whereas she doesn't necessarily find that funny. So that's one of the parts of the sense of humor that we differ on. I wish I could share that with her more. But there are TV shows that she likes. Like she'll watch like crime dramas and medical shows, which I have zero interest in at all. But it's not a big deal. Like we watch the TV that we both enjoy together.
I heard a lot of overlap between you guys and how me and my partner are. It's actually quite charming.
Yeah.
What prompted you to share this information now after all these years?
I honestly didn't think that I could go so long without revealing this information. I kind of thought that the comment sections of all my videos would just be filled with it. And so I want to thank everybody. They've been very respectful of my privacy. Like occasionally I've had people ask, like especially on Patreon, people are like, hey, I'm so sorry to intrude. I'm just curious. What does your day-to-day life look like? Are you dating? Are you in a relationship? And I always answered those questions. Like I wasn't hiding it from when I'd have consultations or hey, hero requests or people on Patreon ask me. I would tell them the details of my relationship. And like when you and I, Matt, when we went to Thailand with all the guys there, which I'll talk about in just a moment. But like I told all the guys there that I'm in a relationship. So it wasn't like this really closely guarded secret. But I don't know, I didn't want to feel like I was prostituting out my personal life for views or monetary. Like I'm a very private person. I don't have any social media. I don't go on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or any of that stuff. The only thing I do is here is on YouTube. And even that, I'm not really showing you guys my personal life because it means so much to me. Like I love my girlfriend. I love my daughter so much, like so much. I don't want to have them linked to my business or money or feel like they're like any kind of a product. So I was just like, no, it's just safer to keep that to the side. But we've made this transition now, and I'm going to do these longer form episodes chatting to you. And it just occurred to me that it was unlikely that at some point I wouldn't just slip. You know, these are not necessarily going to be edited. Like we're just chatting and I want to chat to you. Like, you know, my girlfriend, I know your girlfriend. So like, it just seems natural that that's going to come up. We're going to talk about that. And I was like, look, I don't really need to hide this anymore. You know, like I don't feel worried about it. So yeah, I'm in a relationship. Let's reveal it. This is quite anticlimactic, so there's no massive reason why I'm revealing it. I haven't had any crisis in my personal life or anything like that. It just feels like time.
Well, I'm glad that you are saying this now to avoid the slip because I know that eventually I would have slipped and that wouldn't have been good. I'd rather you slip than me.
Now, there's a bunch of other questions I assume that we're going to ask me, Matt, but what we're going to do now is I'm going to explain what's going on here, like who Matt is and why he's been showing up on my channel and what's going on with the Patreon and all of these differences. I'm going to answer all of those questions now, but we are going to return to my relationship. Like we've got more questions. Like Matt, what are some of the questions you're going to ask me next? Let's have a little teaser for the audience.
Here's a good one. How did you know that your girlfriend was a high quality woman? That's going to be one worth asking.
Mm-hmm. That's a good question. Any others?
Yeah, there's another one. You've been with your girlfriend for 12 years. Why not just get married?
Ooh, why haven't we got married? Yes, I've got a really good answer for that. All right, so like, you know what I'm doing. I'm letting you guys know these questions are going to get answered soon because I want you to keep watching the video for audience retention rate and all of that stuff. But
I want to the video.
This is actually the 4th episode that we've done like this, like me chatting to Matt. It's just the other 3 have been on Patreon. So let me just take a moment to just explain kind of what's going on here. So I had a realization that my personality and I think that my appeal on YouTube, it doesn't necessarily suit what YouTube is kind of for. Like there's a lot of sensationalism, a lot of like black and white thinking. And I kind of feel like in this space, there's lots of, you know, like it's like this and it's like that. And you just got to figure out like this, like trying to keep it simple and punchy and emotional. And I just don't think that that leans into what my best strengths are. I think, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but from the audience feedback I get, people appreciate that my takes and my understanding of things are very nuanced. It's not like anti-women. I don't settle for simplistic answers. You know, these things are complex and they require like a long discussion, but it's not very satisfying to try and take something incredibly nuanced and complex and just try and turn it into like a 5-minute, like punchy, I'm telling you the truth and how it is kind of YouTube clip. And so it occurred to me that if my strength is in that more nuanced discussion, that I'm actually selling myself short and that financially speaking, it's better to lean into what I'm good at. And so it occurred to me that a long format discussion might actually suit me better. Now, that's not to say that we're not going to have the same clips on YouTube. Like you've seen, they've been coming out, but they're highly edited down, you know, from segments that are probably like about half an hour long. I'm trying to get them to 8 to 10 minutes because that's what appeals to YouTube. But on Patreon, we've been doing these episodes and the feedback has been phenomenal. People have really liked it. And so I wanted to bring somebody on so that I wasn't just talking into the void. I wanted some kind of a co-host, a person to ask me questions. You know, YouTube can be lonely. Like, you don't want to just stare into a camera forever. Like, it's nice to have that feeling of talking to somebody. And like, I could have asked somebody who had like a similar YouTube kind of following, like do some collaboration, but I wouldn't have done that just for the business. It occurred to me that if I'm going to do this, I want to really enjoy myself, and I wanted to do it with a friend, which is why I brought in Matt. Matt's a close friend of mine. We've had such fun filming these together, but it's enough of me talking. Matt, can you please introduce yourself? Let everybody know who you are, what you're about.
Excellent. Thank you. I'm happy to do that and happy to be here, as I have been the last several episodes. So who I am, people have been asking, and I appreciate the curiosity. So Alexander and I have been friends for pretty good friends for several years now, and I'll talk about our professional and friendship connection at the end of this spiel. But background on myself, I have spent the last decade or so, I'm 29, last decade or so, a little bit of formal education that I since left to study things like hypnotherapy, things like facilitated mediation, cognitive behavioral therapy, lots of kind of lower scale, slightly less formal trainings. I've been just collecting those over the last 10 years. And more similar Tony Robbins style coaching, you know, kind of life coaching / therapy, but nothing clinical yet. And then I have since redirected at the start of COVID to go back to school to become a clinical psychologist, and ideally specializing in, you know, clinical neuroscience, more STEM directed if I can. There's a huge replication crisis in psychology, and psychology as a whole field is getting politicized. I want to stick close to the science if I can. And so Alexander and I met. He was offering private consultations, and I had just gone through a bad breakup. And so I reached out to him. We had 3 or 4 excellent, very helpful conversations, helpful for me. And then he offered to me to connect on this Thailand idea, which we went to Thailand. We did several retreats together. It was wildly successful. Some of the best times I've ever had. Sounds like similar case for you, Alexander. And it's, we've just been, you know, working hard at it ever since, trying to keep this momentum going. And this was an awesome opportunity, and I took it without hesitation.
Yeah. So in addition to being very pleasant to chat to, Matt's got the understanding around like psychology. Like eventually you're going to open like a private practice and be a therapist. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm basically following in your girlfriend's footsteps.
And you also run like a men's group, right? Like how often is that going on? What's that about, Matt?
Sure. Yeah. So I run a men's group. We meet every 2 weeks roughly. I've been doing it for almost a year now. And it's quite structured. It's if any of you are familiar with the Mankind Project, we take some inspiration from that, although we actually break some cardinal rules. There wasn't a men's group locally in my area that catered to my generation and to the kinds of values I was explicitly looking for. So I just created one. There was a lot of desire for it amongst some friends of mine, and we've just been charging away at that. And at this point, we've got 15 members regularly there. We've had maybe 20 cycle throughout, and we'll reference content like yours, Alexander. Sometimes we'll teach each other things. We'll practice being leaders. Other people take over the group at different times. It's very much a collaborative and socially supportive and challenging environment. And so I've gotten to apply a lot of what I've learned into that context for the sake of these men.
Oh man, it's so worthwhile. If people haven't done it yet, if you can find a local men's group, it's so nourishing. It's so inspiring. I've been a part of 4 men's groups in my life, 2 of which I ran, and they were so important for me. I found that it was one of the first steps that I took to actually understanding my existence, not as a human being, but specifically as a man. So just so you guys are aware what's going to be happening with the future of the channel, you'll still be getting a whole bunch of content, probably even more than before, as I post clips from these episodes to the YouTube channel. But I also don't want you to miss out completely on what we're offering here. So about once a month or once every 5 weeks or so, I'd like to post one of these episodes from Patreon, just like I'm doing now, for free here on YouTube, so that you can experience the full 2 hours. And hopefully that's going to inspire some of you guys to come and check it out on Patreon, because honestly, I've had so much fun filming these episodes with Matt, and I think it's the best content I've ever produced. I'm so happy with this. Now, for you guys who are supporting me on Patreon, don't worry. Even though this episode is being released for free, I've got 2 exclusive videos that I'm going to be releasing this week for you guys to also enjoy. So let me now just talk about what you're going to see in this particular episode, because this is made available for free, but I want to give you guys a sample of what's been posted for the last 3 episodes and what's going to continue to get posted on Patreon. So no more introductions. We're just going to get into some fantastic content now. But you should know, if you are enjoying this and if you like this kind of stuff, go over onto Patreon and check out the other episodes that we've got. At this stage, I think that you're pretty familiar with me and what I offer on YouTube. Like, you know that if you're looking for information about female psychology and how to have like happy relationships, but you don't want it to come with any politics or any anti-women sentiment or any like overly macho, like alpha kind of stuff. You just want an intelligent, nuanced discussion about this stuff in a practical way that can actually make your life better. Then that's what you're going to find continuing on my channel with the small clips I post, but definitely on Patreon with these long episodes. So without any ado whatsoever, Matt, I'm going to share a screen with you and I'm going to show you a woman. And I want you to tell me whether or not you find this woman hot. I want you to say if you find her attractive. I've got a couple of TikTok clips of her. What are you thinking? Are you finding her desirable?
Well, I just wonder, this is going to sound so mean, but I want to know what she really looks like.
Ooh, what do you mean? Why, you don't know what she looks like?
She's put on so many layers of external and internal modification. And this, as simply as I can state it, it's the same way I feel when I see Michael Jackson's face, is I just wonder, what did he look like? Like, what was he trying so hard to not look like to do all of this? And this isn't as extreme as that, of course, but she's clearly done a lot to look this way. And that's the first thing I ask when I see people who are in this position, is I just think, what did you look like before this? I really want to know.
She's got a body that she paid for, hey? Yeah, look, it's obvious. Like, look how intense the makeup is. You can see something's going on with her lips. I imagine she's had injections and, you know, her breasts are obviously enhanced. So she's got that. It's a look, right? Like, it's a look that some women specifically are trying to create. They want the blonde hair. They want that perfect skin that's like tanned, right? Like the sort of orange color. And of course they want the huge tits. It's like who she actually looks like her genuine, authentic, God-given or evolution-given appearance. She has chosen to sacrifice that to try and fit into this Barbie mold, which is a fascinating choice. I don't want to discuss the psychology of why a woman would do that.
Yeah, I do want to ask you straight out of the gate, what is the appeal? Because some men are drawn to this look, right? I guess, let me ask you first, are you drawn to this look, Alexander?
God, no. Like my partner is blonde, but there's such a difference. See, you see her hair here is obviously artificially straightened. You know, I don't think it's common for hair to just be straight like that, except on like a Barbie doll, whereas my partner's hair it's not curly, but it has some natural kind of curvature and waves. All of that blonde is the same color, and you can see her roots showing through. Whereas with my partner, maybe like the outside layer of her hair, it's more blonde because of like sun exposure, but then there's layers. There's like 50 different like shades, 50 shades. There's 49 different shades of blonde there that create that like more natural look. And my partner doesn't wear any makeup. Sorry, the reason I'm referencing my partner is she's who I find attractive. You know, she's my physical type, and she doesn't have anything in common with that. I don't really like makeup on women. I've made videos on that in the past, and big breasts like that, they don't do anything for me. And when they're so obviously fake, it's a real kind of turnoff. But I'm definitely in a minority. Like, she wouldn't be going to all of this trouble, like getting the cosmetic surgeries and the makeup, unless people were finding her attractive, unless she was getting positive reinforcements. So I recognize that I may well be in the minority for that. And I think it would be interesting to discuss the male psychology of, well, what is somebody thinking if they do find this kind of person attractive? Like, what specifically is the appeal? But you don't find her attractive, do you, Matt?
Not particularly, but I do want to slightly take issue with something you said, and feel free to disagree. You know how some men will go so over the top in their bodybuilding that it's almost unsettling how big they get. You know, you can Google images of this. They'll take steroids and they want to be fucking massive, right? I don't think many women, it might be a very small percentage of women, actually respond well to that look. They like a guy who's strong and fit, you know, the V taper and the 1.62 ratio, however mathematical you want to get. But some of these guys, it's almost cartoonish how big they get. And I can't help but wonder, do they think that this is what's attractive, or is it something else that's driving them? And then when I see someone like this woman here who has had so much work done and is going so over the top with the presentation, I'm not sure that she thinks that this is what men want. I'm wondering if it's something deeper than that.
So have you ever seen those studies where they take a man's face and then they Photoshop it to create more testosterone? And there's like 5 different stills. And what they found was that when women were choosing a long-term partner, they'd choose kind of the guy around like the middle. Whereas when they ask which guy would you choose for a one-night stand, they'd choose the guy with the absolute most masculine testosterone, like jawline and things like that. So what you're finding in those bodybuilders is that you might be correct that that's not what a lot of women are looking for with regards to like a long-term relationship, perhaps. But when they're purely just trying to objectify a man, yeah, they do probably want that bodybuilder look. Like if you look at like male strippers, they're not going to have a dad bod, right? They're going to be absolutely chiseled sort of cartoon versions of themselves, because when a man looks like that, it's easier for women to objectify him. He seems almost unreal. People shouldn't look like that. They don't really look like that. Like if you go to like and look at images on Google of like native tribes, like men who are hunting every single day, building shelters, like the most active lifestyle you can imagine, none of them look like bodybuilders. It's not natural for your body to look like that. You have to have a very specific protein heavy diet and be doing very specific like lifts. You never would create that body type. I don't know, maybe like the Vikings or something like that, but most native people, this is not natural for people to look like that. So people have lent into that bodybuilder look, I think, specifically to invite that kind of objectification. Like I want people to see this kind of masculinity. And the same thing goes, I think, for women who have this fake blonde, fake boobs kind of look, is they're specifically highlighting an exaggerated, almost cartoonish level, their feminine features to invite that objectification.
This is what you call a super stimulus, if you've heard of this term. Think of like a really highly sugary, confectious, if that's a word, chocolate cake, or take any drug off the market or on the black market. These are super stimuli. They take something natural that we crave and that we're attracted to, and they just ramp it up a whole factor of 10, and it's really intense. And when I see people like this, or like the hyper extreme bodybuilders, it strikes me as a type of super stimulus.
That makes sense. And so, do you have theories on why men are chasing after women like this?
I do. I'd like to hear your theory first. I feel like we might go to the same place, but I do have my own perspective on it.
All right. So I think it comes down to shame. This is my perspective. Like that's my starting point, because I think that we have this collective demonization of male sexuality. And so there's a bunch of guys who are actually feeling bad about themselves that they find women attractive and that they want to have sex with them, which sucks because there's nothing more natural in the world than wanting that. But it makes sense then, if you feel guilty about your own sexual desires and your own desire to have sex with women, then you almost want to dehumanize women and create like an image of a woman as like a Barbie doll or a sex doll or like a sex object. And so a woman who has so obviously objectified herself to the degree that like, this woman has, like everything about her just says like, view me as a sex object. You have to be so blind if you didn't see that that's what was going on. And so men feel like safe and to do that. And I want to just bring up, like, hopefully you guys can see this. This is a book that I've read recently. It's called Self-Made Man. And it's this woman who spent a year disguised as a man having a masculine experience. One of the best books I've ever read. I honestly couldn't recommend this enough. But in preparation for this segment, I got this quote from her that I thought was absolutely spot on the money. So I just want to read that out for people. A lot of women have asked themselves why so many men are fond of modern porn stars and centerfolds, women who aren't real women, whose breasts are fake, whose hair is bleached into straw, whose faces are painted thick, and whose bodies have otherwise been altered by surgery or diet to conform with doll-like exactitude to something that isn't found in nature. Why, I had so often wondered, didn't men want real women? As I made my way through strip club after strip club in search of some kind of answer, I wondered if it didn't come back to shame. I knew from my own sexual fantasies that there is something appealing, at least in the abstract, about fucking someone who isn't there. When pure fucking an animal releases what you're thinking about, and that is what the male sex drive at its basis seems to be all about, you don't want there to be any witnesses. You don't want to be a dirty, senseless animal with someone you love and respect or are capable of loving and respecting. You'd be too ashamed for her to see that part of you in the light of day. And isn't a mind something like the light of day? A real woman is a mind, and a mind is a witness. And a witness is the last thing that you need. And a witness is the last thing you need when you're ashamed. So fucking a fake, mindless hole is what you need. The faker, the better. What do you think of that, Matt?
God damn. Actually, my perspective is really close to that. I think I do veer slightly in another direction, but I agree that it is based in this idea that this person you're looking at is in a certain sense not real. And the kind of... the logical conclusion of this is a sex doll, right? Or a virtual reality pornographic person that you could eventually interact with AI that's coming. And I think the fantasy, while I agree that shame is a part of it, there's a fantasy that some men have, and I think a lot of men can relate to. Wouldn't it be nice if you could just turn her off with a button, and turn her on whenever you want, and you don't actually need to invest in the messy, difficult human relationship of trying to help someone be happy and try to have them help you be happy. You have to bounce off each other and really relate. That's extremely difficult for a lot of people, and a lot of men are so they've been traumatized or just feel inept in actually managing the relational battle with women in their lives, that it's just easier to say, I'd rather just have someone who didn't need anything from me. Zero maintenance. I just get to do what I want, and then it's over with. The problem with that is that they leave behind the best part of the relationship. They leave it off on the table and never claim it, which is the real human connection, the transcendence of yourself, and the building of that long-standing solidity that can take you through some of life's hardest challenge. A sex doll can't do that for you, and you'll really wish that you had someone in those moments.
Oh, 100%. It's one of those things where you're going to feel so rotten after you've finished and you get that post-nut clarity, like if you were the doll, because what every guy really wants, I think, is to be able to be himself and indulge his desires and fantasies, not just for sex, but for love and intimacy, without being embarrassed, without being ashamed. He wants to feel safe and supported and things like that. But if a guy has been sufficiently traumatized, he's not going to believe that that's actually possible. So the ultimate goal of shooting for a woman who's going to support him in that way is actually lost and sacrificed for the lesser prize of, I'll just have someone who makes no reaction because they're not a real person. That way, at least I can feel safe with myself. And so you get this question that you ask like some guys, and to them, this seems like the only option. All right, you've got option A. You can be with a real woman, but you have to hide who you truly are. You're not able to express your innermost thoughts. You're not able to share your fantasies or your vulnerabilities, but she's a real person, so there's some companionship. Or you can be with a doll, like a fake person, not a real woman, and you can be yourself completely. Whatever your instincts are, you can tell them anything, you can do whatever sexual act you want, and they're never going to shame you. They're also not going to support you. And for some guys who are stuck in that dichotomy, it's either this or that. Obviously, some are going to get siphoned off into the sex doll fantasy, but they're completely missing the third option of, hey, if you actually, learn about this stuff, learn about female psychology, do the self-work, you can shoot for that ultimate prize, which is a relationship with a real woman that you can gradually open up to, be vulnerable with, share your fantasies. And not only she's not going to shame you, but she's going to support you in that. That's obviously the ultimate prize.
Did you ever see that movie Her, Alexander?
Love Her. Yeah, absolutely.
You love Her. Good. As do I. It's the psychological elements of this put into a really interesting context, but eventually robots and AI, and similar to the movie Her, will become a viable reality for people. And it's going to be so interesting to see how many men just take that option instead of the real human connection. I suspect the number is going to be higher than a lot of people are expecting.
Absolutely. It's going to siphon off a huge segment of the male population because it fits in with like the trends. Like, so much of our lives have become easier and about instant gratification, and relationships are hard. Pair bonding is hard. Developing that intimacy is difficult. Dare I say, even impossible for some people. It requires a lot of discomfort and growth. It used to be that nothing worth having in this world comes easy. You have to work for it. Now, a bunch of stuff comes easy. And so people are looking at their lives and going, the only thing in my world that doesn't seem to be coming easy is relationships. obviously I'd like a functional, healthy relationship, but I could get a doll that looks way hotter than any girl I'd be able to attract in person. And she always thinks I'm amazing, always thinks that I'm wonderful, never shames me, never questions me, and I can turn her off whenever I want. I'm willing to accept that lesser experience for the convenience of it. 100% it's going to come.
There is a slight fallacy underneath a lot of the assumption of these guys, I would argue, in that a lot of people think relationships are there to make you happy. And if it's not making you happy, then the relationship is not working properly. But I take a quote from Eckhart Tolle, who says, relationships aren't there to make you happy. They're there to make you conscious, which is a very different goal.
Why would you seek consciousness unless it was to make yourself happy, though?
To quote another person, Carl Jung said, I'd rather be whole than good. So I think seeking consciousness of all of reality is more important than simply trying to be happy, because I think embracing the non-happiness, the unhappiness, is it's part of our explorer nature. And if you have ever had the desire to do shadow work, it comes from that same place, to know all of yourself rather than just the good parts, which is actually, I think, most likely to make you the most integrated and the most safe and effective person you could be.
Yeah, I think I would agree with all that. I think it just gets difficult when we potentially have different definitions. Like what I would consider happy, I might talk about that authentic experience that you just described and like, yeah, that's happiness. Whereas for somebody else, it'd be like, no, I want to be completely delusional. I don't want anything real. I just want to be floating on the wings of my own imagination and fantasy.
Yeah, defining terms would be useful for this kind of conversation.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that the question posed by the woman in the quote that I just read from that book, she asked, why aren't men attracted to real women? And it does seem to fly in the face of like evolutionary science and logic, in that why on earth would we have developed a taste for fakeness? You know what I mean? Like if we're going to have any kind of reinforcing sexual selection, surely it's going to highlight those parts of a woman that are real and tangible, which is why I think that you can't claim that this thing about, the huge fake lips, the huge tits, the fake tan, I don't think that that's necessarily instinctual. I'm not saying that those are biological. It's like you said with the super stimuli. They might take a nugget of something and then expand it out like crazy. But I think that the obsession with like e-girls, like you can see these girls like on Twitch or whatever that just try and make themselves look as artificial and plastic and doll-like as possible. I don't think that you can explain that phenomenon with evolution. To me, it has to be explained by nurture. There's got to be some conditioning and some psychological stuff driving people's sexual preferences in that way.
Can I give it a shot? I might have a little bit of perspective on the evolution bit.
Of course.
Sure. So our species is not quite this way. We're a little bit in the middle. We're not a perfectly monogamous species. We're not a perfectly polyamorous species. There's a lot of ways to tell that based off of physiology and sexual dimorphism, and it's a fascinating rabbit hole to go down. But there is a part of us, because many species actually do operate this way primarily, that the main role for males is just reproduce as much as you can. And have very little investment at all with the children and with the women, right? The females. All they do is just, here's sperm, you take it from here, I'm off to the next delivery, right? And so this ability to, I would say, possibly dehumanize, or at least fully push away the female as nothing more than an opportunity for sex and no human connection at all, caters to that hyper extreme version of our reproductive strategy, which is deliver sperm and peace out. That's all I do.
That's a really good point. I'm glad that you brought that up, because it's important to always remember, of course, that men's sexuality runs in two potentially different directions based on which sexual strategy. Am I the investment parent who's like, I'm having kids, monogamous, I'm going to make sure those children survive? Or am I the spread my seed parent where I'm just playing the evolutionary numbers game? And this is actually one of the reasons why I disagree with what Ayn Rand wrote about appearances. There's a guy on Patreon who I've been having this back and forth argument with about the merits of Ayn Rand. So he'll love me saying that I disagree with Ayn Rand on this particular thing. But she had this quote that said, show me the kind of woman that a man finds attractive, and that will tell me everything I need to know about his character. The basic theory that being, if you're going for like a natural beauty kind of like look, like an intelligent, accomplished kind of woman, it shows that you're not intimidated by the reality of who they are. You're a high quality man. Like that's how awesome you are. But if you're after some dumb, ditzy, bimbo blonde kind of girl, then that shows that you're not that kind of a man. And I understand the nugget of truth that she's trying to get across, and there's merit to it. But I don't think that her understanding psychologically was sophisticated enough to actually understand the evolutionary perspective that you just gave, in that men are capable of segmenting women into two distinct categories, and they'll find them attractive for different reasons. And so you might be attracted to the natural girl next door kind of look when you're like, yes, I'm looking for the mother of my future children. But when you go to the strip club and you're not looking for someone for that parental investment, you're just looking to spread your seed, you might find a whole nother thing attractive. And I don't think that it's fair to just say that because a man can find that kind of woman attractive, like a stripper kind of look, that necessarily means that he's like a low quality man or anything like that. It's just an acknowledgement that he has that instinct actually programmed into himself. That makes sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. We have these instincts in you've talked about this, the dual mating strategy in women. They are drawn to men who will provide parental support and the pair bond, the monogamous, security. And they're drawn to Chad, who they just want to have sex with and be done with. And it's funny where you'll hear women describe how when they really like a guy, they will suddenly change the rules on him the way they wouldn't for a guy who they're just interested in a one night stand with. And it's that kind of intellectual confusion I would call it confusion. It's that kind of paradox that men have our own version of too. And we just need to understand this about ourselves.
So it's probably a really worthwhile reminder then for men that if you're in a relationship and your girlfriend comments on some hot movie star guy, be like, ooh, I'm like, there's some part of me that responds to that. That doesn't necessarily mean that she wants to leave you and the relationship you've created and the family you've created and be with that guy. It's the same as just acknowledging like, yes, you do have backup instincts inside yourself that say this is a viable mating strategy. And if that is the case, then you're going to look for those extremes of masculinity or femininity, depending on your gender.
Right. And we don't need to find people who don't have these instincts. It's probably not even possible. What we are looking for is someone who can sacrifice the need to pursue that instinct in the face of a much better, realistic alternative.
Absolutely. I had somebody ask me once, do high quality women not have hypergamy? And I was like, I think I did a Patreon video on this. I'm like, no, that's not how it works. High quality doesn't mean you don't have these problematic kind of instincts. It means you have the right relationship to them. Hypergamy in and of itself is not necessarily a problem. It makes sense. How is evolution possibly going to survive unless women have geared their attraction towards the highest quality men in their surroundings? What is difficult about hypergamy is the point when it becomes toxic in terms of monkey branching or having unrealistic standards to the point where you price yourself out of the market and you end up 40 and you're still alone because you just could never have your hypergamy satisfied. So obviously hypergamy can be a problem, but it doesn't mean that your instincts when you're a high quality woman don't exist. It just means you have the right relationship to them. And so the same goes for like your instincts as a man. Like, I don't think there's going to be any men who are really being honest that say, yes, I'm monogamous and I've never found another woman attractive apart from my wife, even when we're 65. You're going to have that instinct that responds to that cute 25-year-old waitress who smiles at you when she takes your order. That's okay. That's fine. It doesn't really mean anything. It's not significant. It would be more worrying if you didn't have that. Like, where's your genetic instincts? What happened to your programming?
Well, even better, women don't want you to not have natural instincts and attraction. They just want you to be able to funnel it properly into a good life, into good decisions. They don't want you to be impotent. They just want you to have self-control.
Yeah, absolutely. I found that in my own relationship. Everything was so much better when we were able to just talk, like, honestly about other people that we found attractive. And if I'm honest, mostly me, but it was nice. Like, if you're sitting there watching TV with your girlfriend and like some hot, gorgeous girl comes on there, you want to be like, wow, she's beautiful. You don't want to have to worry like, can I share that with my girlfriend? Is she going to get upset with me because I find other people attractive, So that's one of the things I've very much appreciated from the very beginning of my relationship is that my partner was 100% understanding of those instincts. And that's actually a good segment. Matt, before we move on, why don't we have some more questions about my relationship since I brought it up?
Yeah, I'll start with the one that we teased everyone with, which is how did you know that your girlfriend was a high quality woman when you met her?
Man, it was so obvious. I had dated and been like seeing like a number of different women, so the basis for comparison was really, really simple. So I had kind of like for my qualities, like what I was looking for, number one was kindness. You know, I'd experienced in my early life some very unkind women, you know? And so in order for me to actually feel safe and like excited to spend time with a woman, she had to be nice to me. And she was absolutely not just like kind in like a distance kind of way. She would actively ask me questions because she was genuinely fascinated with my experience of the world. She showed an interest in me that I hadn't really seen from anybody else before. Like, so why do you think that, you know, like, how do you feel right now? She'd ask me all of these questions. And so I'd answer them, and then I'd just have like more questions. And never once did she ever shame me or make me feel bad about the things that I thought or felt. And so like, for me, I was sort of like, I don't know what else necessarily I would be looking for. She was extraordinarily creative. She laughed at all of my jokes. There's another difference personality-wise between the two of us, is that I make a lot of jokes. She doesn't make so many jokes, but she laughs at my jokes. And so in that sense, we have the same sense of humor. She's very intelligent. I dated girls before where I'd talk about something and they'd be like, oh, like, that's cool that you're interested in that. I have no idea what you're talking about. And you're like, okay, that sucks. Whereas I'd rather chat to her than anybody. Like, her mind is so inquiring, it's so quick, you know, and that's just a pleasure. You don't have to slow down in any sense. And we had the same goals. Like when I talked about having children, you know, she was very much on board. When I talked about moving to like the country and living in nature, she wasn't on board to start off with. But then as we talked about it, she remembered like all of these like holidays that she'd had, and those are the best times of her childhood. She's like, yeah, why would I want to have children anywhere else? And so it was a case of like, we weren't like love at first sight necessarily, but it became obvious over like a number of months that she's a high quality woman because we had disagreements or arguments or tests or whatever like that, and she just kept passing them. So it's just like, yeah, I still remember the conversation I had with my like best mate at the time where I said to him like, this girl's amazing. If I can't make it work with her, I probably can't make it work with anybody.
Wow. What a standard. Gosh, I have things I want to share of my own personal relationship, but we're talking about you, so let's keep doing that.
Matt has, just real quickly, Matt's girlfriend's beautiful inside and out. He's been with her for like 2.5 years, and I'm sure over the course of our episodes, we're also going to hear about his relationship. And we've talked about it a little bit in the other episodes as well. But yeah, this episode's about me, so
let's keep it that way. This is what the people want, is why they're here. She's going to make a great therapist, your girlfriend, by the way, with what you said. Intelligent, not judgmental, curious. She's in. Next question. Is your girlfriend similar to your mother? Let's get Freudian.
Yeah, but just in the positive traits, like without getting too personal, like if my mother has some like less than desirable like personality characteristics, like things I didn't enjoy growing up or I might not vibe with so much now, my partner doesn't share those ones. But the things that I admire about my mother, like her intelligence, her creativity, her dedication to like her children, my partner has all of those positive traits. So I think that they're similar in terms of the good parts, but I haven't recreated in my partner like the negative parts of my relationship with my mother, if that makes sense.
That does. It sounds like you really knew what you were looking for, which is vital.
I mean, that's one of the benefits of dating around a little bit as a younger guy, is you get a sense of like once you dated enough women and seen how it's not working, when one comes along and it is working, you're like, oh, cool. This stands out and it's quite obvious.
Yeah, absolutely. And for some of the guys who are having trouble getting a lot of dates going, you can still learn a lot about people just from non-dating, just from interacting. This will help you with men and women and people of all ages. Being a really deliberate questioner, an interviewer of sorts with everyone you meet, you'll start to pick up instincts on people that shine through your whole life. It's excellent. Can I ask you another question?
Yeah.
You've been with your girlfriend for 12 years. Why not get married?
I mean, why get married?
Why aren't you married? Yeah. What's taking so long?
There's not a massive big reason that's going to satisfy people. Here in Australia, there's no difference legally. We have something called de facto relationships. So if you've lived with somebody for 2 years, and I've been living with my girlfriend for 8 years now, they incur the same legal obligations if you like split up or with child custody or anything if you get married. It's not like in the United States where signing that marriage piece of paper is a big deal and suddenly changes the status. In Australia, the government just sort of defaults you to do it, which I have issues with, but I'm not going to go into that. But the reason that we didn't get married, I actually do have a good answer to this now that I think about it. It's like I proposed to my girlfriend. I guess she's technically my fiance. I proposed about 8 or 9 years ago, but we never went through with like a wedding. And I think it was because we were like I didn't enjoy my childhood. I think that my girlfriend, without speaking for her, she had some difficulties as well. And our relationship is really special in that we really found like another person that we could feel safe with, we could grow with and create like our own family. And rather than feeling like we want to celebrate that, I almost feel more protective of it. Like I was underwhelmed when I announced my engagement by the response from my friends and family. I was like, I don't think they can possibly appreciate how meaningful this person is to me and my life and what this relationship is. And I wouldn't want to have a wedding where she and I know how special it is and how important it is, but no one else really kind of gets it. They just use it as an excuse to get drunk. That would seem like it was almost cheapening it. And so I feel kind of protective of it. And I don't really feel any inclination to borrow the legitimacy of like marriage and the terms like wife and husband as a way of explaining my relationship to somebody else. You know what I mean? I don't need that. I don't need their approval or anything like that. So I don't need to say like she's my wife in order to feel like it's kind of special. And in a sense, we're kind of resting on our own authority and our own responsibility to know what our relationship is and what it means to each of us. I mean, if you ask my partner, she couldn't care in the slightest. And this might be difficult for some people to understand. Like, well, why doesn't she care about marriage? Like, neither of us are religious, so we don't have any like under God kind of feeling. But when you are really in a relationship with another person, like, and I have no doubt that we're going to be together forever, like zero doubt. And that might sound cocky or weird to people who can't understand what it's been like to be with somebody for this long and have that kind of relationship. But you don't need the government to sign up on your relationship in order to feel like it's legitimate. That seems laughable. You know, we know inside ourselves what it is. And so honest to God, it's not like we've had a massive amount of discussions about it. It's been completely irrelevant. We don't think about it. It's not important.
Wow. If I can ask a follow-up question that I think some people would wonder, statistics do show that married couples, the children of married couples tend to do better than the children of non-married couples. Are you assuming the statistic just won't apply to you given the quality of your relationship?
I mean, it's just irrelevant. I mean, in every single sense, we're married, like in terms of we're committed. So I would consider myself part of that statistic.
Great. I love it. Next question. Was your girlfriend high quality when you met her, or did you have to help her grow to become high quality?
That is a good question.
I think you did answer that a bit, but yeah.
I don't think either of us looking back would consider who we were high quality, but it was so obvious that we were moving in the right direction. Everything about her said I'm ambitious in terms of I want to have a fantastic life. She was not afraid of hard self-work. She was excited by it. I mean, she's going to become a therapist. She loves this stuff. And so I had no doubt when I met her that she was going to become the amazing person that she is now. And so watching her now is so vindicating. Like I feel so validated in my choice, but 100% it's our relationship that has helped her grow into that person and vice versa. You know, like it's like the biggest life hack, such a cheat when you've got two genuinely like positively inclined people who want to achieve the best for themselves. When they help each other and they've got that masculine feminine dichotomy, the progress is so rapid and so complete. And so, yes, I think that she made me a high quality man from the potential that I had as a young person. And likewise, she probably wasn't a high quality woman yet, but she had all of the potential. And now through her relationship with me and my like leadership, like I think she really needed some masculinity in her life. And I brought that. Like I was very strong. I knew what I wanted. And it really allowed her to absolutely drop all of the masculine pretense and difficulties she was having and sink into her femininity and become who she is. And a large reason why I got together with her, like the big part of the appeal was she's going to be an amazing mother. Like you could just tell, like she's got that beautiful mothering energy. And now actually watching her as a mother, I'm like, of course, she's so good at it. She's so amazing. I can't describe how good the thrill is. Like you love your children so much. It's such an intense, crazy feeling. And then when you watch like their mother interact with them in such a way that like I couldn't possibly hope for anything better for my child than them being raised by this person. the feeling for me of achievement of like, I've won, I've done so good in life, like look at what I've managed to provide for my child, it's just indescribable. And of course she's thrilled to watch me become a father, because the same is in like true for her. And so I know I'm probably getting off topic for the original question, but I just wanted to say, like, as much as she was high quality when we first got together, before we became parents, is always just about the promise of what we could ultimately become. Seeing her as a mother, now I'm in love with the person that she used to be and all the nostalgia and feelings like that. But I've fallen in love with her all over again in a way more intense way now, seeing her as a mother.
Wow. Thank you for pouring your heart out. It's so no, I'm totally serious. This is men need to be able to see this kind of emotion coming from a man who's put his life together properly. So thank you.
I'm trying to hold back my emotions. I'm hoping it's not coming through too much. I don't want to get too emotional.
No, you're right on the edge, and this is where we want you. There's something to be said as well, that being high quality doesn't mean you're done. Doesn't mean you've achieved. As you said, you're pointed in the right direction. You're making the right choices. You guys are in young 30s. Come back in 50 years, see how much progress you've made even then. You know, you're nowhere near done developing and becoming a high quality person. You've got so many trials and levels to transcend. It's going to be amazing to watch.
I can't wait. I mean, this might sound strange to some people since I'm 34, but I cannot wait to become a grandparent. I'm so excited to do that. The thought of my daughter eventually becoming a mother, and then the role I'll have as a grandparent, fills me with an indescribable sense of joy and keeps motivating me to become better and better and better.
Parents tend to agree with you. That's pretty exciting. Here's another question for you, and this is a bit of a broader question. Is the juice really worth the squeeze? And I don't think we even need to ask.
Like, is the difficulties associated with being in a relationship worth it for the benefits?
Yeah.
Oh, God, 100%, 100%. The difficulty, of course, is that people will project their own experiences and relationships onto my answer there. And they'll be like, no, my relationships brought me nothing but heartache and pain. And it's like, yeah, they can, which is why I so strongly recommend against rushing into relationships, being in relationships with low quality women. But when you're with a good woman, there's no downsides. Like, I'm trying to think. It was uncomfortable in the first part of the relationship when we're coming from completely different experiences to actually negotiate those differences, figure out what our shared values were. And we'd have like fights or arguments like in the first like year, like so much more than we'd fight so rarely now. But in the start, there's a lot of tension as you got to resolve that because you're trying to join your life with another person. But that was fascinating. I loved that. It was revealing of who I was, and you knew that you were building a foundation for something that was going to yield benefits for you for the rest of your life. And so there's no downsides. Like in our life now, I mean, I've been financially supporting us, I suppose, but it's so that she can study, and so eventually she can support us because she's going to have a high-paying like therapy career. So that juice is definitely worth a squeeze. I wouldn't invest that unless it was worth it. And of course, you know, she's the mother of my child. I'm thrilled to support her in whatever way that I can.
I do have another question for you.
Okay, one more, then we'll move on.
Yeah, this is the last one of this section, which is great. Would she be your type if you met her today?
Oh yeah, that's a simple 100%. It would be weird if I hadn't, because I've grown with her, right? Like we are each other's environments, and so we've grown in tandem. And so if I'd never met her and I was the person that I am now, and she was the person she is, and we met now, it would probably be weirded out. I'd be like, "Are you my long lost twin or something?" Like she's 2 years younger than me, so obviously it's not possible. But no, it would be absolutely seamless. So yeah. So let's move on from that, but let's have some more teasers. What other questions have you got coming for me in the future?
Yeah, here's a good one. How did she feel about you constantly going out to interview young, beautiful women in the streets? That's going to be a really fun one.
Yep.
You want another one? In some of your videos, you recommend, this is my question. You made a recommendation to some men that they should wait and be patient before they get into a relationship because they don't have a lot to offer when they're young. And yet you got with your girlfriend at 22. So what's the deal, Alexander?
Oh, exposed. Yeah.
Finally.
We'll get to those. That actually reminds me. I want to just, let's just like have some fun for a moment. I've got a couple of memes that we'll just look at with Matt before we move on to something more substantive. And what you just mentioned there was pretty on the money for this one. Like you've used my own videos against me, which is similar to this meme. I'm just going to share this screen for you, Matt. Let me know if you can see this.
You know, I could see it, and now I could see you. Oh, there it is. Yes.
Oh, yeah, good. So let me read this out. Do you know how to be friends with girls? Just say, I love you. She will say, we're just friends. And then women say, you dare use my own spells against me, Potter?
Oh, man. There's actually a brilliant art to deliberately friend zoning yourself. This is a dirty secret in the pickup game. In fact, I'm going to quote a very unlikely source for Red Pill advice, and that is the show Friends, where all of the female characters are trying to get Joey to stop dating every woman that he meets. And they say, try being friends with her first. And so he starts introducing himself as, I'm looking for female friends. And lo and behold, all the women suddenly want to date him because they've never met a man who just wants female friends. And he said, you didn't give me advice, you gave me a pickup line, was his line. And so if you tell a woman that if you friend zone her preemptively, it is such a role reversal, such a table turning, and it's so funny to see the reactions you might get. It is a bit devious, but it does work.
That's so funny. I have no idea if that will work. I never tried that. Please, in the comment section, if anyone's tried that, I want some data. It sounds potentially genius, because it's right. No woman's used to getting friend zoned, so she's like, what, you don't want to sleep with me? Like, no, now I need to have you.
Well, think of the psychology of it. If you genuinely just want female friends, all of your simping goes away because you don't want that. And that in and of itself puts you in the 1% category of men, because every man that she meets is simping after her. You know, if you genuinely just want to be friends, you'll immediately divert your attention to whatever else you're interested in. And so many women are just completely confused by that. They don't see men do that. And so it's fascinating to them.
It's fascinating that, like, I don't think that this is like just funny. I also think it's practical. Like, maybe if you do want a bunch of female friends, it might be worth like actually doing this, you know, who knows? It could work.
Actually, this advice.
They could be setting you up. It reminds me of the video I did where it was called A Sneaky Way to Dump a Low Quality Woman. And it exploited this same female instinct that if you're in an abusive relationship and you're terrified that the woman is going to react really badly to you when you dump her, and you need to somehow trick her into her dumping you, then just start acting really feminine, really clingy, saying, I love you, start trying to spend heaps of time with her, and she'll be like, oh, who's this guy? And she'll dump you, in which case you're like, yep, got out of that.
If only that worked. Sorry to ruin the parade on that, but so many women will not break up with the man. They will bring him all the way to the point where they're about to break up with him, and then they just won't do it. And because the other person always wants the other one to break up with them, so that they can. There's actually a currency in being the one that was rejected, because then it excuses almost any behavior you do just at the outset of the breakup. And a lot of women are banking on not being the one that ended it, so that they can go off and do whatever they really wanted to do that ended the relationship in the first place.
You might be right. That's not my feeling. So this is an interesting thing to discuss. I would thought that people would be the one who is itching to be the breakup person so that they can preserve their self-esteem. You know, they'd be like,
there's pros and cons.
They didn't meet my standards. But I can see the validity in what you're saying. I suppose I have a slightly more cynical take on it as to why women don't necessarily want to break up, because it's not so that they can excuse their behavior after the breakup, like sleeping around like so many women do. It's because they can shop around for a new boyfriend and legitimately like try and monkey branch. They're like, yeah, I know I'm done with you, but I still want to enjoy all the benefits of being in a relationship with you while I try and find the alternative replacement.
I can't really see the distinction, Alexander, between our two opinions then. If she is failing to break up with a man so that she can shop around, I mean, she's kind of just setting up the next thing. And so, I mean, I guess the distinction is who actually verbally ends the relationship, but the behavior does kind of come out the same way.
Yeah, no, I would agree. The only distinction is that I thought you were saying that she is pushing him to try and get him to break up with her, whereas I was more like, no, she doesn't actually want to be broken up with. She just wants to keep shopping around. But let's move on. I've got another meme here I want to show you. All right, this one's a little bit longer, but this is all the double standards that men and women experience. So women are brave if they hit men. Men are evil, brutal perverts if they hit women. Women are romantic if they suddenly kiss men. Men are perverted if they suddenly kiss women. It's just a mistake if a woman goes into a man's bathroom. Men are perverted if they go into a woman's bathroom. Women doing work? Help me. Men doing work? It's natural. Women staring at a man's crotch? That's flirting. Women staring at women's breasts? It's perverted and offensive. Woman, let's split the bill. She's independent. Man, let's split the bill. He's cheap. The police. She touched my crotch. Who cares? He touched my breasts. Jail time for you.
Ouch. These are basically exactly spot on. I just want a blanket statement. Yes, these are double standards that are real and valid. I agree.
Sorry, do you think that they're valid to point it out, or do you think it's valid that these double standards exist and
no, certainly they shouldn't exist. Well, we cannot equate male and female sexuality. And unfortunately, this is maybe something we disagree about. Male sexuality has a history of being, on average, more likely to be violent and aggressive and perverted. Just saying. So I do think that these double standards don't come from nowhere, but it is entirely wrong to then apply them to all men writ large. That is sexist. But like many stereotypes, they come from something in reality, is my thought there.
Yeah, I think that it's intellectually dishonest to claim that there is an exact equivalent, for example, like if a woman, pushes a man like out of the way, and she gives it there, that's not great, that's violent. She shouldn't be doing that. If a man pushes a woman out of the way, it's worse. It's worse. Everybody
a man
knows
can
that it's
kill
worse.
Someone with one punch. Most women can
It's
do that.
obviously worse. We can sense that. However, I don't think that the law should necessarily take that into account. I do think that legally that there needs to be the same standard across all individuals. I just think that morally and socially we can understand that it's not appropriate. That, a woman should never grab a man's crotch and a man should never grab a woman's breast. And I think legally the consequences for that kind of sexual assault should be the same. But there's a lot of men who are not going to feel particularly threatened by a woman doing that. They're going to be pissed off. They're going to bat her arm away or whatever like that. But the fear response that he's going to experience is going to be less than the woman's response to fear experienced by some strange man just coming up and doing that to her. And so that's my perspective. Legally, it needs to be treated the same. But socially, let's just be real,
Yeah, as we trend more and more towards a true legal egalitarianism, then we need to sacrifice these kind of socialized differences in perspective and actually just go by what the rules say, because that kind of flexibility with the rules is enabling a lot of bad behavior, and we can't afford that.
Yeah, people are finding the blind spots and exploiting it. Let's go to this one. If a girl fails an exam, look, she's still getting married, she's having a good life. When boys fail in the exam, working some crappy job.
Oh, the food looks good though.
That is the point of this meme.
This that's what they wanted us to notice. It's not wrong, but it really does make sense in the light of the human sexual strategies. It is a double standard. Once again, it's not based on nothing. Men and women are not held to the same standards because we have evolved two different biological mechanisms to solve different kinds of problems. And that's just, we can't get away from that. We have to recognize that.
I feel like I'm always trying to get this across to men, because like one of the biggest problems that always comes about with understanding women is when men just take their own experiences and then they project that onto women, and they imagine that women are having the same experience, just a female version of it. It's not true. When you're a young guy and you're trying to figure out what your place is in the world, what you want to do for a career, all of that good stuff, there is a lot of pressure on you, because if you don't make it, if you don't manage to provide for yourself, that's it. That's your only option. No one's really going to come along and rescue you. And that's not to take away from women who are also hustling and they've got ambition and they're working really, really hard. But psychologically, all of those women know that they have a safety net. They can always marry a man and get taken care of. They have an innate role of motherhood and wifedom that they can always fall back on. And it tends to be that women who are not doing well in life, they get pregnant early, like they default to that role really, really quickly, because then they have this socially accepted place, Men don't have that option. And so I think that there can be like a little bit of a feeling amongst men when they're seeing women competing in this stuff of like, you're kind of just playing at it. Like when a woman's doing at it, like all of your achievements, I don't want to take away from it because you've earned it all, but it's not the same. For me as a man, I'm walking this tightrope without a safety net. I've got no parachute. You're doing the same physical task that I am, and all props to you, but you have a backup option because you're a woman. And so it's not the same.
Wow. And we wonder why male suicide rate is higher. That kind of pressure that's such a game changer. Knowing that you have a safety net versus knowing that you don't is actually, really stress inducing.
Absolutely. All right, so speaking of double standards, let's move on to, I've got this video that somebody sent to me. There's a woman out there on TikTok who really doesn't like me. She was reacting to a video that I considered one of my most moderate kind of videos, and I wanted to pull out the section that I thought was that she was responding to that I don't have an issue with. What we're going to discuss right now is male sexuality and the demonization of male sexuality and the exploitation of male sexuality. Because I have my perspective, which is very pro-man, like trying to find compassion for men who are suffering under this stuff, whereas she was like, men are awful, men are terrible. And anyway, let's watch the video first, and then we'll watch her response to it. Let me know if you don't have sound on this, Matt.
From a purely biological perspective, one of the best indicators of your success as a...
My apologies, everybody. I'm just going to fix this one for Matt, and I'll reshare it with sound. All right, that should do it.
From a purely biological perspective, one of the best indicators of your success as a biological organism is your ability to attract a partner, mate with them, and pass on your genes. Is it surprising that men who struggle to attract women into their lives feel like they are failures? Too often, our society demonizes male sexuality. We celebrate female sexuality as empowering and beautiful, an expression of goddess energy. Yet, male sexuality is viewed as perverted, violent, and out of control. Male sexuality is just as valid as female sexuality. All human beings want to feel connected to one another, and sex is one of the primary ways that men feel that connection. Young men are not just sexually unfulfilled, but emotionally unfulfilled. They have a strong desire to be with the women around them, and yet they feel invisible. This feeling of being completely ignored as a sexual prospect by the opposite gender is a uniquely male experience, and one that very few women will ever be able to understand. This unfulfilled need for sexual and emotional validation makes men vulnerable to exploitation from industries created to separate such men from their money. There is a lot of talk about the exploitation of sex workers, and undoubtedly there is some justification for this, but what about the other side of the story? What about the exploitation of men who fall victim to these industries? Webcam girls, prostitutes, strippers, and other sex workers are well practiced in the art of giving men the emotional and sexual intimacy they crave in exchange for money. Of course, the intimacy is an act. There is nothing authentic about these interactions, but many men are willing to pay lots of money for the illusion.
That's the video. To me, that's not controversial. I'm simply talking about how the sex industry takes the loneliness of men and exploits them by, promising some relief from this relentless feeling that they're plagued by. But this woman...
Can I tell you why it's controversial? Because I know there's a stupid reason, but it is. You have shifted the focus away from women and put it on men. That is controversial.
God, that's depressing. Of course, you're absolutely right. But anyway, I
learned it from watching you.
Let's watch this woman. I'm going to pause it as we go because I want to respond to what she's saying.
Yeah, where did some men get this idea that they are like completely entitled to sexual and emotional intimacy without putting in any fucking work? Like,
all right, just from the outset, she's obviously not asking that question in good faith. She's not actually curious as to what the answer, where does male entitlement to sex come from? You can tell by the tone of her voice, she's just like saying it like, oh, isn't it disgusting that people are entitled? And she wouldn't listen to the answer, of which there's a really good answer. The answer isn't that men feel entitled to sex. Like, what's happened is that the basic feeling that every man has, which is that he's entitled to dignity, to love, to support, to comfort, to care, to all the things that he should have got as a child. If you were neglected or abused as a child and you've got some unresolved trauma, you feel that feeling of entitlement to like, I deserve to exist. I deserve to have my needs taken care of. But then when you become an adult male and the testosterone floods in, you've got this massive sexual energy flooding through, that becomes your primary need. And so the reason why men feel entitled to sex or any kind of, like approximation of that is because they've taken the legitimate entitlement that they did feel as children that wasn't necessarily fulfilled, and then it's got transformed and added on to this feeling of sexual entitlement, of which the answer isn't, of course, to shame men and make them feel horrible. It's to be like, okay, well, let's go back at those original needs that were not met as children, those unmet developmental and emotional needs, and let's meet them with calmness, with care, compassion, with love, and then you may find that this entitlement that you use to demonize men just suddenly dries up.
Alexander, I think you're giving this woman more credit than she actually warranted in this clip, because you didn't actually say anything in your video that expresses this claim that she seemed to put forward that men believe they are entitled to intimacy or sexuality or anything like that. Like, your video doesn't actually say anything like that. So she is really reading into it and taking it. It's a total straw man.
It's frustrating. It's one of the things that you experience a lot as a YouTuber, unfortunately. Like, people send me, I kind of wish that they'd stop, but they send me messages on Patreon or emails or whatever. It's like, hey, this podcast just chatted about you, or did you see this video that this person sort of made about you? And I used to, like, earlier on in the channel, like, watch some of those videos, but they're so depressing when you're like, okay, there's obviously just such a bad faith. Like, I'm going to take what you've said out of context, give it the worst possible interpretation, then use it as a justification to just kind of go nuts in this particular direction that I was like, there's actually no point. They're barely speaking about me. And it's interesting that this woman's gotten so frustrated based on that clip, which to me was so reasonable, so compassionate. Like that's what triggered her. It just shows she's on the edge looking for an enemy at all times. What's that expression? When you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. You know, when you feel yourself to be an oppressed victim, then everybody looks like an abusive patriarch.
Well, maybe she's going to make some really excellent points after that perfect summary of your view. So let's see what she has to say.
Didn't you say I was the optimistic one?
Everyone
I'm the
deserves
sarcastic one today.
Okay.
work. Like, everyone deserves love, but no one is entitled to. And, like, I'm sorry there's an epidemic of men who feel lonely, but just...
Does she seem sorry to you, Matt?
No, she doesn't. Not really.
You're not sensing an overwhelming compassion for men's loneliness? Like, and why not?
No.
What's like, oh, I'm sorry that there's men's Okay, like, you're not, obviously, but why not? Like, what's preventing you from feeling compassion for if men are lonely? They're humans, you know? They deserve dignity, don't they?
You think it would be that simple?
say that they're exploited by the sex industry is incredibly tone deaf. Oh no, I paid for sex with a woman and she sees it as transactional and she doesn't give me love and no attention. Yeah, it's almost like you paid for that interaction. And also, you're not being exploited if you are, you know, of sound mind and you make the decision to pay for sex or intimacy. The real people...
I mean, let's actually talk. That's the most substantive thing that we've heard so far. She doesn't think that men are being exploited by the sex industry. I think that they are. And the reason why I think that they are is because it's so cynical, I feel like, to take desperate men who want love, who want connection, who want companionship, who want relief from their sexual urges. They want to make that connection. They want to feel like a valid biological being, and they're not succeeding. Like they're failing, you know, they're not reaching all of their goals. And then you've got webcam girls, you've got OnlyFans girls, you've got strippers or prostitutes or whatever it might be, who are specifically looking for the loneliest men because they're the biggest spenders, and then giving them that fake performance of intimacy and connection to try and extract as much money from them as possible. Of course, I feel sorry for the women who get into those industries as well. But to claim that those men are not being exploited, to me, that's what's tone deaf. The very accusation that she pointed at me, I feel like is appropriately directed towards her.
I agree. And the accusation that these men aren't exploited, she based it on this claim that these men are of sound mind. But in order to be in this desperate state where you're willing to throw tons of money at people who don't know your name and will never see your face, I can't see how you could claim that that person is of sound mind. It seems like you're over-ascribing agency to someone who's clearly in a lot of pain.
I mean, you could use her own words against her. It's almost like she feels like the men who are doing this are crazy. Like, why would they do this? You know, look at how exploited this is men. It's like, yeah, exactly. That's how desperate they are. You can't have it both ways. That's my feeling.
Mm-hmm.
He kind of mentions this as a footnote. It's like, yeah, sometimes people say that, like, women are being exploited by the sex. Like, how can you say that the
I mean, Yeah, I did say that. Like,
Well, Alexander, are women exploited by the sex industry?
yes, absolutely.
Very good.
Like, I'm an old school feminist in this regard. I don't get on board with the radical third wave, like sex work is empowering to women. But like that, do you know what they call people who have views like mine? They call them SWERFs, which means sex worker exclusionary radical feminists. If you bring up, and there are probably legitimate SWERFs who like don't think that sex workers deserve rights and things like that, but that's not me. Like, I read this book, and I recommend everybody read this book. Given a lot of book recommendations today, it's called Prostitution Narratives. It's by Caroline Norma, and it was 20 essays written by survivors of the sex industry. Some were trafficked, some got into it for their own reasons. But if you want to know what prostitution and stripping is like from that side, from women's side, it's absolutely heartbreaking what these women go through. And the claim that these women are empowered and representative of feminism is absolutely ridiculous. Like, I would just hazard a guess. I would obviously have to ask this woman before I can make assumptions about her. I want to extend that courtesy to her that she didn't to me. But I'd want to say, like, how much compassion do you have for sex workers? Because I have tremendous compassion. I don't think women should be doing sex work. I think it's beneath their dignity. I think that they're desperate and they need money, and that's why they get into it. I would like them to receive support to get out of that cycle of drug use and prostitution and all of that stuff. But my compassion for women is real. It's very, very sincere. And I think it says a lot more about her that she can't take my compassion for women at face value. She has to assume that it's fake. You know what I mean? Like, the idea that we could have a discussion about the exploitation of men by the sex industry and also feel compassion for women, that just shows how limited and lacking in nuance her worldview is. But it doesn't say anything about me.
No, and for our audience, if you want to watch an interesting debate on this topic, Intelligence Squared is a YouTube channel that hosts really well done, excellent debates, and they have one on the sex industry, and it'll give you both sides, and both sides are well represented, and come away with your own opinions. The only thing I'll add is that if you ever change your voice to speak as if you are somebody else, you kind of instantly ruin your argument because it just sounds like you're being an asshole.
Like when she imitated my male. Yeah, it sounds so
you can't do
condescending.
it. It's impossible to change your voice to imitate someone and not make yourself look like a dick. So she shouldn't do that.
I kind of want to like pause the episode now and then try out imitating a bunch of people to see if I can do it without sounding like a dick, because that's an interesting hypothesis that it's impossible.
I've ran
But I
this
think you're
experiment and
probably
I've
right.
always failed. I've always failed this experiment. It's impossible.
Okay, all right, let's keep watching.
Customers are being exploited when women are literally being trafficked to meet demand. Like, I get that rejection sucks, okay? And believe it or not, women go through it too. I've been rejected and it sucks. But just because...
Okay, that right there, that's what I don't get. She's like, I've been rejected and it sucks. Like, she knows what that feeling is like inside herself. So then why is the next obvious step seemingly beyond her? If she knows from personal experience that it sucks to be rejected, why doesn't she feel compassion for the rejection that men go through?
I think that what she is thinking you mean, and I wish I could ask her this in person to see if this is what she thinks you mean, is that the real victims of the sex industry are the men, not the women. I think she thinks you mean that, but that's not what you're saying. You're saying, in addition to all the female victims, we also have male victims. It's an even worse problem than we thought.
I felt lonely and unwanted. It didn't give me the right to walk up to someone and demand that they owed me something.
Who's she arguing against? Who makes that claim?
Alexander, she's arguing against men, this large conglomerate hive mind flash mob group called men who all think the same and all do the same thing. There's no differentiation. It's much easier to argue against that.
Okay, so here's the thing is, though, what fascinates me is she doesn't have to. Nobody's forcing her to have this man image in her mind and to argue against it. So it's a choice. And the question is, why? What is she getting out of it? Like, what psychological benefit is there for her in existing in this crazy victimhood where all men are this conglomerate out to exploit her?
Well, I would say from a psychotherapeutic perspective, this video that she's making, if she just made this internally as like a journal and it was just a rant, it was kind of like slam poetry without any meter or anything, that might be a good start to start investigating. Okay, here's what I just think. Now, what do I think of what I think? And you start to look through it with a more reasonable lens. But she just put this on the internet. Like, here's what I think. everyone enjoy. And it's not filtered at all with looking at the individual, with asking more critical questions of oneself. She's not in dialogue. It's just stage one of like a 10-stage process to come up with a well-formulated argument.
Yep, 100%.
You literally reduced our bodies to like holes to make money, and then you're complaining that we're like tricking you or that you're being deceived and exploited. Like, you have.
Did you do that, Alexander? Was that you that reduced their bodies to holes? I always wondered which man it was. It must have been you.
That just doesn't even make sense. She's saying that men reduced women's bodies to holes to make money. Men aren't making that money. Women are making the money. Whatever.
Have to earn intimacy and look like everybody fucking else needs to do that. Okay, I'm sorry.
So tone deaf. You think men don't know that they have to earn intimacy? Men have to earn intimacy at a way greater rate than women have to. Men have to prove themselves over and over again. We're human doings, not human beings. Like, she thinks that that's a unique struggle to women. That's crazy to me.
Yeah, it's the word tone deaf is, I'm really glad she used it because we can just keep repeating it. It's actually kind of hilarious.
You can't just buy a girlfriend. Maybe, you need to do some self-work, maybe develop a personality and some, emotional intelligence. And
we know. Men know that. Men know that we have to do that work. Are you kidding me? Sorry.
This is going to be the meanest thing I'm going to say, but I've just rescripted this whole video and I'm pretending that she's just talking to herself in the mirror.
You might get lucky, but you're going to have to put in the fucking work like the rest of us. Either way, it is not a problem for women to solve.
Let me ask you this, Alexander. Are there any problems that only men need to solve or only women need to solve? Are there any problems like that?
Look, maybe if I thought hard enough, but I think fundamentally you're missing the point. What do you want? Like, if you feel like gender relations are bad and men don't understand women, then you should be doing everything in your power to reduce tribalism and to try and come together to take responsibility. So the degree to which you think that the issues facing women, men need to step up and be allies and help out with, which I don't disagree with at all. But then the opposite is of course true. It's so incredibly sexist to just say that's an issue for men are dealing with, men's loneliness, men being exploited. You guys go solve that. I mean, obviously, so I don't want to get too kind of personal, but it's difficult for me to imagine that a woman who's in a relationship with a good man, who had a good relationship with her brothers, who had a good relationship with her father, who understands the nature of human community, that we're all in this together, could possibly fall victim to that kind of toxic tribalism where she's just like, nope, I don't care about your suffering because we have different genitals. Not my responsibility. Don't want to hear about it. Also, by the way, you need to fix all of my problems because I'm a woman.
I really believe that if she were here in person and we talked to her, she wouldn't be like this. It's just, this is a consequence of the whole social movement pushing this kind of reflex mixed with the internet and a non-critical audience that she very likely has. So a lot of people just applauding and saying, this is how we should speak and feel. I don't know what the comment section of that video look like, but I think that what we're seeing here is this is what happens when you don't have dialogue, is that you spit venom as opposed to asking questions, being curious, taking perspective, wondering what you might be missing and requesting feedback. And this kind of interaction doesn't lend to that.
It's like a symptom of how little time women have actually spent listening to men's issues that they can straw man to this degree. That's my takeaway, is I feel like there's a vested interest in not inquiring into men's suffering, not looking too deeply at their unique struggles, because there's that danger that if you actually look at what's going on, you might have to change your worldview and actually consider the privilege that you've potentially been experiencing. And I know I brought it out before, but that's one of the reasons why I found this book so incredible, because this woman, I mean, she's like a lesbian, hardcore feminist kind of woman. Like, she was dressing up as a man to get access to the privileged gender. She thought she was going to uncover all of this, privilege and patriarchy and all of this stuff. But she was very sincere and scientific in the way that she went about it, and she befriended these guys, and she was horrified to find out just how much suffering men are experiencing and how little support they get from it. And she goes away, she has a nervous breakdown at the end of the video, at the end of the book. Like, it really takes her toll. Seeing men suffering to that degree and being in amongst it, and then considering from a whole different perspective the life that she's led up until that now, it completely shifted her worldview unbelievably. It's why I think I'd like to buy this book for every single woman that I know, because I just feel like it's so important that they actually take the time to listen and to hear what men's problems are. And you could only be this tone deaf or entitled as this woman is if you've spent no time listening to them. I would find it fascinating if she was actually to listen in on like therapy sessions from a man who's been like addicted to porn since he was 9 years old because his older brother showed it to him, or his dad left magazines around or whatever like that. And it hijacked him and it warped his view of sexuality, warped his view of women. And now he hates himself and he can't find a girlfriend and he's lonely and he's desperate and he's like an addict in that sense. If she could actually learn to empathize and feel compassion for the pain that he's going through, could she possibly still maintain this attitude? Or is it only in ignorance that she's allowed to grow this monster?
Well, she said, if you're of sound mind, then blank. And I think that first premise needs to be challenged. People who are addicted to prostitutes and porn and strip clubs and whatever that's similar in that domain, it's very reasonable to say that they're not of sound mind. And therefore, all of your judgments of their character need to be seen through the lens of this person is an addict, and we need to explain their behavior based off that, and not just assuming that they're irrational and self-contradictory. I did want to mention one thing you would kind of, at the beginning of the video, the clip you showed earlier in that same clip, you mentioned we can recite women's issues. Men know what those are. You know, go to any stranger in the street and say, give me a list of women's issues. They'll tell you, you know, sexual violence, abortion and whatnot, voting recently, you know, the pay gap. They'll have a list. You say, okay, what are men's issues? And people don't have that list on hand, including men do not have that list on hand. And it's remarkable.
I so strongly agree with what you said. And that's the issue. Worst, like the best response I feel like you could possibly get is, I'm not sure. I haven't thought about it. That's what I heard when I asked women. I have a video where I asked women that exact question. What are those issues? And the women that I liked the most, who I vibed with, were women like, I'm not really sure. And like maybe they would ask me, like they want to get educated. Unfortunately, a sizable portion of the women were like, men don't have issues. You know?
Yeah, or they say men's issues are toxic masculinity, which is men causing their own issues, and therefore they need no empathy from us.
That's so frustrating. Yeah, I don't like that at all.
You're getting me all riled up.
Let's change the mood slightly. Well, let's go on to some more questions about my relationship. Let's
talk about a happy, healthy connection between two people.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, so would you mind pulling down the video? I can see you.
Yes.
This question is the one that I put in there because I've also had someone else ask me this personally, which I'm relaying his question. I won't tell you who it is. In some of your videos, you recommend that men should be patient and not expect to settle down too quickly, as they're very young and they don't have a lot to offer. You were 22 when you met your girlfriend. So are you not breaking your own rule by pursuing this relationship at that young age?
I mean, it's a guide, not a rule, right? So you got to look at the purpose behind the rule. The reason why I tell men to wait is because it's going to be a long time, I feel like, for most guys before they reach the sound enough judgment to be able to tell who's a high quality woman. They need to have dated a number of women. They need to have had life experiences. And then also for them to be high quality enough to be able to attract a woman at her prime. And so the danger, if you're like 22 years old, of getting together with a girl is maybe you haven't dated enough women yet, so you don't know a high quality woman enough. Maybe because you're only 22 and you don't have like that experience, that stature in society, that you're not going to be able to attract a really high quality woman. So the kind of women that you're dating at that point aren't of the kind of quality that you're going to be able to attract if you wait 10 years. So that's the reason for that advice, is I want men to cash out of the dating market at their peak so that they can get the best possible deal. However, you understand that the rule is proved by the exception. If you do meet a woman in your journey up to get to that absolute peak and you're like, I can't do any better, she's everything I've ever wanted, you'd be so stupid to let that woman go out of some loyalty to like a rule or a guideline. And so, no, I very much stand by that advice. It's just that for me, you know, my childhood wasn't great. And so I entered adulthood with a kind of mania. You know, I crammed a lot of life experience into a very short period of time because I was like, I need to make myself happy. I need to figure out life. I need to, you know, so while I didn't waste, you know, like 5 years being too nervous to speak to girls or not really know what I want to do to go seek out a better friendship circles or travel or do anything like that. No, I hit the ground running. I'm like, yep, I don't care if it scares me. I'm going to take risks. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. And the benefit that it gave me was that I was then able to judge at a much earlier age what was going to be right for me in a romantic setting. And that came at a price. Like, I didn't spend any time really working on my career in those years, you know? I didn't really take off in any kind of sense financially until a lot later because that just wasn't as important to me. I wanted to figure out myself and my human relationships first. And that actually breaks the mold. I feel like there are some guys like me and, you know, I've become friends with them, a lot of them, like over Patreon and stuff. But a lot of like the Hey Hero requests I get are from guys who are more like late 20s, early 30s. And they're like, I'm doing really well in life, you know? I've got like a mortgage, you know, I've got this fantastic job, you know, I'm really happy in a lot of areas, but I didn't bother to deal with dating because it was too difficult. And now I'm like, no, I want to have kids. I want to get that. Like, they neglected that part of their life. And it's like, all right, cool. Now you've got to figure it out, and it might be hard, but at least you're striking out from a position of strength. Your stature in society is going to work well for you in the dating market.
Yeah, I've often met men who think that they need a ton of experience, and they'll actually find themselves in a situation similar to you where they find a high quality woman who clearly cares about them, who they like, but they say they have this nagging fear. Is it like, have I slept with enough women? You know, have I really nailed that cold approach in the club with that bombshell just so I know I could do it? And that kind of checklist and needing to do all these things, first of all, it's insatiable. You'll always come up with another more difficult thing that you haven't done yet until you're finally ready. And it's driven by this sexual strategy that men have, which is just keep spreading seed, keep spreading seed, keep spreading seed, and don't just pick somebody. And there's something to having enough experience, but it's so easy to have that just cramped and you can't relax and finally accept you've seen enough, you've gathered enough data, now pick somebody amazing.
100%. It's a huge topic. I'm not going to add too much onto that. That's the whole topic of sexual debt. I've got a number of videos on that in the main channel and on Patreon. But yeah, it's huge, that phenomenon, and guys really struggle with it. I get Hey Hero requests every single week on that exact topic.
Well, let's move on to the next question then. How do you handle her emotional fluctuations? How do you guys handle conflict?
So, she, like, even from when I first met her, my partner was never like volatile. She never experienced like her emotions like outwards, like she never wanted to blame me or like start fights. She had negative emotions, you know, insecurities and whatever it might be, but they all went inwards. She never punished me for them. And so I dealt with those emotional fluctuations with compassion. Like, I could see if she was feeling scared or withdrawn, you know, it was my job to kind of provide some masculine space like around her and support her to bring her out of that. And that's so fulfilling. It's such a beautiful thing to do. So it wasn't a matter of coping with it. It was an absolute joy to be able to do that. And then of course yield the benefits as she gradually became more at peace with herself and more confident as she got older. Then she's more pleasant to be around. Like, it's wonderful. So I didn't find that ever to be a problem. Now, that's not to say that there won't be instances when just a misunderstanding or a difference of values or something happens where I'm triggered or she's triggered and a conflict kind of erupts, but they're very rare. They don't last very long. And we have strategies like actually in place. You know, I don't know if you've ever heard this, but it's like, you say something like, when you did this, it made me feel this way because of this. And you're trying to bring it back to the feelings. And for me, the struggle is always to get out of my own story and try and listen to where she's coming from, because there's been enough situations in our relationship where she did something and it seemed as though it was codependent or abusive or something like that. Not because of her, I want to make that clear, but simply because of my history. And that's kind of like, I've been mistreated a number of times. And so I have a certain amount of momentum to viewing things in those lenses. And she broke that mold for me. She's helped me trust people and all of that stuff. But every now and then something might happen that will be like, oh, is this it again? Are we going back there? And like, and then we might have like a kind of conflict. And the way out of those situations is to ask questions before I just react and hear like, why did you do that? What was it going on for you? And inevitably, I'm always embarrassed in those situations because the actual motivation guiding her isn't some nefarious, underhanded, I want to treat you badly, Alex kind of situation. And so now, I mean, that's mostly in the early part of our relationship. Now it's more like if there's a misunderstanding, the first instinct is, okay, there must be something that was miscommunicated. There must be something else kind of going here and asking on about that. And of course, I don't want to present her as though she's absolutely perfect. The same will go for her. Something I might do that's completely benign and neutral. And she's like, whoa, like, what's that? Is that thing that I was scared of is going to get repeated from history? And then it's a case of just being like, I completely see that you're emotionally triggered. I get that. Let me explain where I'm coming from. Let me quell your fears while also validating the legitimacy of your emotions. Because even though I'm not the one that caused it, I just triggered it. The fact that you're upset about this thing that happened to you in the past, which I'm reminding you of now, that's a legitimate thing that occurred and your emotional response is absolutely valid. And so they don't last very long. We're not a volatile couple at all.
I really appreciate you admitting, which is important for people to know, that conflict can be handled quite well with a plan in place. If somebody wants a good recommendation on this, I'll plug a book for not my book, it's a book that is very good that I like to plug. It's called Crucial Conversations. I think something, How to Talk When Stakes Get High or something like that, the subtitle, you'll find it. It's a classic book and it breaks down not just in relationships romantically, but other kinds of relationships, how to stop a conversation, go through various stages, get all the meaning onto the table, and come to a much better conclusion. It's remarkable. Highly recommend it.
I feel like some people might be a little reluctant to order that book out of a false sense of pride, like, I'll figure it out, or this should just come natural. And let me just remove any feeling you have of potentially shame about going onto Amazon and ordering that book right now. I haven't read it, but I very much trust Matt's recommendation, is that if you didn't have a mother and a father who fought in front of you, and then you got to see from start to finish how they handled the conflict and resolved it in a positive way, then how on earth are you meant to know it? You're not born knowing how to resolve disagreements or conflicts. And that sucks. Like, you should have been taught that. And so there's no shame in seeking out resources and information specifically on if two people can't see eye to eye, what is actually the stage forward. And for any fathers listening out there, please don't refrain from fighting in front of your children. Obviously, we're not talking about throwing glasses and things like that, but it's not a bad thing for them to see that mum and dad can have conflict sometimes, so long as they get to actually witness the resolution, and that you take the time afterwards to explain, was that frightening when we were disagreeing? Look, this is what had occurred, this is how we handled it, and this is the way that you can handle things in the future. Conflict resolution is one of the most important parts of a relationship, and we need to be teaching each new generation how to do it well. And so if you weren't taught, because I certainly wasn't taught, teach yourself. You know, listen to some of the videos I've got on my channel and on Patreon where I've got the conflict resolution. Check out the book that Matt just recommended. Learn how to resolve conflict properly and break the cycle of unnecessary fights, breaking up relationships. Learn how to work through your issues.
It's such a game changer of a life skill. Let's move on to the next question.
Yep.
How did she feel about your constantly going out and interviewing young, beautiful women in the streets?
So she came with me. Like, this
Whoa,
might blow.
I didn't know that.
This might blow people's minds, but no, my partner would join me for those expeditions. It was so much easier filming when she was there because I was so much more approachable when I've got like this, you know, pretty blonde girl. she's such a friendly, like, looking person, and I just seemed less intimidating. So one of the reasons why I was able to get so many women to agree to do these interviews and to answer so honestly is because she was holding the camera for a lot of those while I was reading the questions. So she loved it. Like, she thought that it was fascinating. I mean, she's got an interest in psychology anyway, so we're delving into this stuff, and it's really, really interesting to her. And I also think that, like, she wasn't threatened by me talking to the other girls. I mean, not to sound arrogant, but when you have a strong connection with a partner, you don't worry about that. She knew that she's there, but she knows that I've chosen her, and that's done and dusted. And I think that when she'd come out with me, like, it was probably interesting for her to see me be like very confident and like smiling and friendly and chatting with like these pretty girls that I was talking to. But I think that it just increased her attraction for me, not in like a dread game kind of way, thinking I'm going to leave, but just in terms of, like, that's a skill that I'm quite good at. I can be quite extroverted. I can talk on the fly. I can discuss, you know, topics with people. And so she's kind of seeing me at my best. And so she loved the channel. She loved what I was doing straight away, and she loved coming out with me and just thought it was a huge amount of fun. So it didn't cause any issues in our relationship or anything like that, if that's what people are wondering.
It might be an interesting recommendation to spice up your love life. Start a YouTube channel. Go interview women in front of your partner. I'm sure that'll go great. Here's the next question.
It would probably go so badly for some couples. And so
yeah,
it's just a worthwhile thing for me to just add in here, is that it's probably another reason why I don't talk so much about my relationship, although I think I'm going to talk about it more in these episodes now. But so much of what works for me and my partner isn't going to work for everybody. And so the content that you get on my channel, it's not like I'm just describing my relationship. Obviously, I'm informing some of the masculine feminine stuff from the dynamics that I've witnessed, but a lot of it's just really specific to me. Like what works for me is not going to work for everybody else. And so what I do is I'll take the things that have worked for me or worked for my friends in their relationships, and then I talk to women. I talk to men as well, but I ask them about that. And then I find those common threads. You know, if something that works for me doesn't work for 5 of my other friends, then that's obviously unique to me. But if something that I've discovered about masculinity and femininity works really well for me, and every person I talk to, they're all like, yes, exactly, that's exactly how it is. I'm like, cool, that gets to the YouTube channel because that's universally applicable then.
Excellent. That's a beautiful filtration process. This is a follow-up question to that last one. How does she feel about your work in general? Do you ever disagree on the things that you say here?
I don't think so. I think when we started like the channel, especially with the interviews, she'd watch them all, but you know, she's very busy now. She's a mother and she's studying her master's like at the same time. So she doesn't watch absolutely everything. And largely that's because, you know, like you guys, you know me from my channel, you know what I'm like. I talk about this stuff a lot. I talk to her about that. And so if she's watching a video, it's not like it's necessarily new ideas. Like, oh yeah, we've had multiple conversations about that. And often I'll brainstorm with her. Like, I'm thinking women are kind of like this, and she'll give me that sort of feedback. I can't think of anything that she's ever watched where she's like disagreed. Maybe she disagreed like in the first minute of the video. And then as I explain myself, she's like, oh, I totally see where you're coming from. But also, like, understand, for me, because this is my work, I'm highly specialized now in dating, sexuality, and gender dynamics to like an insane degree where I thought about this stuff so much. My partner finds that stuff interesting. She loves the evolution stuff, but she's more interested in general psychology. You know, she's not just going to be treating people in her therapy practice for dating and relationship issues. There's going to be a whole range of things. And so a lot of the stuff that I might cover in my videos, she's never thought about before. You know, it's not like she's got these preset opinions about this stuff and then I'm contradicting. So when she hears my rationale and like, here's why I think this, she's like, oh yeah, that all makes sense. And she's not looking to provoke fights or disagree with me. So I don't know if there are certain things that I've mentioned. I don't know that there are, that if she was to sit and think about for 100 years, she might find some disagreements. But to be honest, in those situations, if she ever did disagree with something that I said, like she thought it was wrong, I would probably listen to her, you know? Like she may have caught something that I missed, you know? So no, there's never been any fights about my content. She loves what I do. She's incredibly proud of me. She thinks it's cool. She really likes it when I get recognized in public. It doesn't happen that often because, you know, I live in Western Australia. It's not like I'm in downtown Los Angeles or something like that. So it's pretty sparsely populated, but it has happened a few times. And she's like, oh, I kind of forget that, you know, you have some quasi social media fame. And that's always like a fun little moment.
Oh, how fun. I can only imagine. Let me ask you one more. Would you consider yourself in charge in the relationship, or is it more egalitarian?
I would consider myself in charge.
Mm-hmm. How does that manifest?
It doesn't, saying that, it feels difficult because I know how that could potentially be interpreted. But for anyone who's like really feminist inclined, who thinks that that sounds dictatorial, let me explain to you how this works from my partner's perspective. She doesn't want to be in charge. She doesn't. Women largely don't want to be in charge. I know that might offend your sensibilities, but deep down, they don't really want to. What women want to do is to indulge their femininity. Most women, not all. I understand I'm generalizing, but I'm talking trends here. So just give me the benefit of the doubt and follow me for a moment. What they're looking for is some direction, is some safety, is some confidence and some masculinity, but they don't necessarily want to provide that. That's why they hook up with men. That's what they're looking for in a relationship. They're looking for masculinity. And so for my partner, when she was single and she had to figure out like where I want to go on holiday, what I want to do with my life, and all that pressure's just on her and she has to figure it by herself, that's a lot of stress and it forces her into the masculine and she's not able to explore her femininity completely. That's why she chose me. She could have chosen from any number of the men who found her attractive and wanted to be in a relationship with her. She chose me because I was already going in the direction that she wanted to go, right? And so it's not like a privilege that I have that I'm in charge of the relationship. It's a responsibility that I've voluntarily taken on. And she's so glad that I've done that because she gets to go along in basically the same direction she would go in anyway, but she doesn't have to shoulder that masculine burden. She's freed up to play that more supportive feminine role. But in case there's any confusion about who's really in charge of the relationship, if I started moving us in a direction that she didn't like, she would tell me. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know how it would go. We'd have to negotiate. If I wouldn't budge, then she'd break up with me, you know? Like, so men who are in charge in relationships are democratically elected leaders from a constituency who want them to do that. And that's what it's like in my relationship. I'm not a dictator. I've never forced her to do anything. I just make those decisions so that she doesn't have to. And if at any point she was unhappy, she would let me know. You know what I mean? So it's just it's a gift that I'm able to give her. And so, yeah, I guess I'm in charge, but not in the way that could be interpreted. That's my answer to that.
It's a very excellent framing, and it really is voluntary. And this is the important distinction to understand about masculinity and femininity is that they have different strengths, right? And they should not be replaced with each other and assuming that everything will go the same. My relationship, she and I, and this is almost out of the masculine feminine realm, she and I have specialties, things that we really know about and other areas that we don't know as much about. And we consult each other because she's an expert in this field. I'm an expert in that field, or, expert. And so whoever leads is one person usually knows more about what they're talking about. But in terms of just executing, like, all right, this is the plan, let's do that. It's usually a consensus. And I'm more that personality in my relationship as well, to just throw the door open and say, let's get to it.
Yep. Cool. It makes sense. Are there any more questions on that, or should we move on?
Let's move on.
Okay. Just while I set up this next part here, can you give me some spoilers? We'll have one more round of questions. So what else have we got to look forward to before we wrap up?
Here's one. What would it take for you to leave your girlfriend?
Mm-hmm. I can answer that.
People are going to want to know that one. Mm-hmm. And then how red-pilled were you when you two met each other?
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's a good question. Yeah, I'll definitely answer those. All right, so
very good.
We're coming towards the end of the episode, though, and what we've done for the other episodes is we've finished with a segment we call Matt's Minute, right? So Matt is he works as a coach, and he's going to become a private therapist, and he knows a lot about things like CBT and like the mind, areas that I don't necessarily have a lot of expertise in. And so I give him this challenge in this Matt's Minute to see if he can condense a really important, profound topic into just 60 seconds, and I always time him for that. Are you ready to do your minute, Matt?
Yeah, it's no pressure at all, right? I am ready. I will talk fast and I will refer to notes. But yeah, I'm ready. You can pull up the image and the image will be worth following as I speak.
All right, let me just share that image with you so that you can see it as well.
Sure thing.
All right, I've got the timer ready, 60 seconds on the clock, and go.
We need to know how to find good advice. What do people do to make tough decisions? They ask their friends, they ask strangers on the internet, they ask their gut, and then they run with whatever satisfies their initial biases, which often doesn't work. So here are 3 questions to ask in order to vet someone's advice before you even hear it. Question number 1, does this person have what I want? This is your 80-20. If you want fitness advice, are they fit? If you want financial advice, are they wealthy? If you want relationship advice, do they have the quality of relationship that you want? Technically, this question is enough, but I'm going to give you 2 more to narrow it down a little further. Question 2, does this person apply the traits they have for this expertise across multiple domains? This will tip you off that something may be missing. For example, someone gives you relationship advice and they have the kind of relationship that you want. What are their friendships like? What about their family? How well do they take care of themselves? Presumably, the things that help you get a good relationship should help you in these other areas. Finally, question 3, is this person a skilled educator? This is a huge bonus if you can find it. A great teacher will help you figure things out in your own way in stages that you're ready for. They won't just hand you information, they'll draw it out of you, which is the true meaning of the word education. It's Latin root meaning to draw out. Done.
1 minute, 6 seconds. Very good.
Wow. It's always 106.
106 does seem to be your number. Oh my God.
Let's just call it Matt's 66. That might work better.
This could not be more pertinent to this day and age because you've never had more people online giving advice, and you have to start discerning who knows what they're talking about, who's grifting, who's full of shit, who's doing it as like an ego boost, because there's a massive self-esteem boost that comes from like, I'm a person with knowledge and I'm a person who gives advice. And before anybody points it out, yes, I'm well aware of the irony of me, me pointing that out. But I tell you, it's one of the reasons why I started the channel, is because initially I didn't really have any aims for it other than I'm going to go out onto the streets. I'm going to take this stuff that other people are saying. I'm going to tell it to women. I'm going to give, and then post those interviews online and people can make up their own minds. But being on YouTube and then starting to gain in popularity, I would see like, hey, you should check out this person. And I started watching like advice from men giving like dating and relationship advice. And I was appalled. I was like, oh, this is so bad. You know, they're so simplistic. It's so hateful and tribalistic. And it's one of the reasons that motivated me. Like, I think I need to add my voice into this because, look, I mean, there's no point me faking kind of humility. I was like, I have more knowledge on this than these so-called experts. I didn't know that I did, but I was devastated when I saw just how ill-informed so many of the people offering advice was that it felt incumbent upon me to sort of say something. So that didn't sound remotely egotistical at all, did it, Matt?
Not even a little, but neither does your entire channel. I'm just kidding. The reason why I plugged this particular topic for this episode is because you have just revealed your credibility to everybody. And I do want to mention, these are heuristics. It's not that you need credibility to have good advice. If someone who has credibility gives you advice and then you pass on that same advice, it's the same advice. It might be good. You don't want to get caught into appeal to authority and say, well, you're not credentialed, therefore everything you say must be wrong. But you want to be able to start with these questions. And as you mentioned the irony, I also understand the irony. You people have no idea who I am, and yet I'm giving you advice.
I think that in the same way that a magician is in the best position to be able to debunk like fraudulent people who claim like psychic powers because they know how that sort of deception works, I think being in this space, it makes it a little bit easier to spot people who are not necessarily well informed or coming from the best place. And before anybody asks, I'm not going to name any names because I'm completely ill-informed. I was talking about when I first started the channel, I do not watch other people's content in the same space as me. And one of the reasons for that is I don't want to accidentally plagiarize anybody else's ideas. When you watch my channel, you're seeing completely authentic, pure, my thoughts, my ideas based on my experiences. I don't take other people's thoughts and then repackage them as my own. But I would unconsciously if I started watching a bunch of other people who talked about similar stuff to me. So I have no idea if other people are giving good advice now. I'm completely uninformed. I'm talking about way back when. I feel like if my relationship was to end tomorrow, which is probably a good segment to then answer that question you're going to ask me, what would it take to end the relationship? Yep. But I would probably have to stop posting videos. Like, it would shatter my, like if I had made some massive type 1 error and everything was just completely off, what am I going to do? Keep giving advice that I couldn't even make work myself? That would make zero sense, whatsoever. But so let's transition and let's have this be the sort of final segment of this episode. Final questions for me about my relationship.
Yes, absolutely. If you want to pull this picture down and I can ask you.
No worries.
What would it take, because you already plugged this one, so I'll ask you this now. What would it take for you to leave your girlfriend?
I would have to lose trust in her. I think so long as I can trust her, we could probably get through anything, I would imagine. So if she suddenly had very different like values, but I still trusted she was coming from like an authentic, sincere place, then I would probably welcome the very interesting conversations to come from that place. If we wanted radically different things, that would also end the relationship if just practically we couldn't make it work. But largely, I feel like nothing could really break it apart unless she was saying things to me and I was like, based off things that you've done, I don't trust you. So that's if she like cheated on me or she kept really important information from me or something like that. And look, maybe that trust could be rebuilt, like I don't know what the circumstances would be. I'm not at all worried about this, but yeah, I don't think that you can be in a relationship with somebody who you don't fundamentally trust. And so that would be the deal breaker, I think.
Very good. That's a reasonable deal breaker. Next question. What was it like to fall in love with her? Was it an emotional process or a rational process?
Oh, like if your spectrum of experience is like this, it suddenly becomes like this. You know what I mean? Like you're just going along, living a single life, dating girls casually, whatever. Nothing's really threatening you, but you're not really engaged or really invested in what's kind of going on in your life. Suddenly you start this process of, I don't really like the term like love. Like I say, I love you to her, but scientifically we'll just talk about pair bonding. But going through that pair bonding process of her starting that relationship, that third entity of us, it was really frightening, really scary because I kept wanting to get closer to her, not in a codependent way, not in a fake way, but I wanted to know her at deeper and deeper levels, because the deeper I saw into her mind and her values and her emotions, the more beautiful she became to me. But you don't get entry to those parts of a woman without paying a pretty hefty price. You have to be vulnerable yourself. And so the first part of the relationship, I'm sharing all the things I've learned about myself up until that point. And it's fun. Like, it's flirtatious, it's physical, you're just kind of floating on that high. But then once you've kind of discovered what there is to discover about the person up to that point, if you want to take it to that next level of going deeper, you have to challenge your own level of comfort and safety and then risk that vulnerability to her. And so I'm like, I kind of got together with her, the first part of our relationship, and I attracted her to me by really playing on my masculinity, being very cocky, very confident. Like, that's the part of my personality that I really showed, and it was very effective. But then to go deeper into the relationship, I couldn't just rely on continuing to do that. So suddenly it became more about, all right, this is the thing I'm now scared of, or this is something I've always been a bit insecure about, or I'm feeling vulnerable about this. And you never know the first time when you share something like that with another person, how they're going to receive it. But she was sufficiently attracted to me and invested in me and genuinely, sincerely in love with me that she wanted to know those things. That didn't necessarily make it painless. It was frightening. I was scared a lot. Each new stage of the relationship was very, very frightening. But as frightening as it is to open up to another person and to try and pair bond at a deeper process, the reward when you're received in your vulnerability in exactly the way that you hoped. She's like, thank you so much for sharing. I love that you shared that. That makes me love you that much more. And it's so vindicating and validating. That's why I mean that spectrum got like that, because my highs were that much more. Like, she doesn't just accept me for like the kind of cocky masculine role I'm playing. The deeper parts of myself that I'm showing her, she's loving she's loving that even more. Oh, so good, so good. So the process of falling in love or pair bonding was lots of fear and lots of joy. And then gradually it's calmed down because I don't feel as vulnerable anymore when I'm coming up with something new, and I'm always growing. I know she's going to receive it positively. It's still nice and I still get that pleasure, but I'm also not that scared to do it. I've almost come to expect it. I hope I'm not taking it for granted, but it's just the status quo now. That's
fantastic to hear. It's really inspiring for those of us who are in younger relationships or not in them at all to know that it's possible to, for so many men, they fear that being vulnerable and open to a woman will instantly destroy attraction. But you've just explained how once the barriers have been passed and once the gates have been gone through, you can actually show your real self, including these unfinished parts, and to be rewarded for that with deep connection and still maintain that attraction. It's very good news, and we can bank on that.
It just quickly, so, if you open up to a woman and she rejects you because of it, usually one of three things have happened is one, you opened up too early, you hadn't built enough attraction, she wasn't invested in the relationship, so you rushed it, possibly because of your own unresolved issues, you couldn't wait and you just had to get there. That's the first mistake. The second mistake is you chose the wrong girl. She was a low quality woman. She wasn't somebody safe to invest in. You need to be picking the right girl. You can only be in relationships with high quality women or women who have the potential to become high quality. Or number three, it was okay to open up to her and you did wait enough time, but you did it in the wrong way. A lot of guys share their emotions in a codependent way, essentially asking their partners to mother them. You can't, and I've got videos in this, so check out my channel, my back catalog for information on how to do this, but you can't express your emotions in such a way that makes her responsible for them. Women will never find that attractive. And so I never did that in my relationship. When I was expressing vulnerabilities, it was not like, I have these issues, here you go, now please fix them for me. No, she doesn't want to do that. And she probably want to do it more than most women because she's starting to become a therapist. She probably likes being there for other people's issues. But even she's not going to find that attractive. She wants to see that you're on top of it. You're sharing in such a way that invites her to help you, but you're ultimately still the masculine one taking responsibility for yourself. So yeah, right. Thank you for letting me jump that in.
Yeah, she doesn't want to do it. And even more importantly, you shouldn't want her to do it. This is part of taking responsibility for yourself.
I'm so sorry. I do need to jump in. I'm so
please.
Because
I knew that was going to happen.
I'm worried that in that comment, some men will feel ashamed if they have that impulse of wanting their partner to mother them. Do not be ashamed of having that impulse. If you're looking for your girlfriend to mother you, that probably means that you are not sufficiently mothered yourself. Okay. And that is applicable to a lot of men. A lot of men did not receive the emotional and developmental nourishment that they need growing up. And so that instinct is actually a rational one. You're still looking for somebody to fix that. The problem is that it's not going to work. Girlfriends aren't going to do that role. So don't feel ashamed about having that desire, but also don't follow that desire. Take that desire, take it to a therapist. A therapist is the right person to reparent you, not your girlfriend.
Amazing caveat. Thank you for saying that. You pulled my own foot out of my mouth. I know you don't like this phrasing, but I'm going to use it for the sake of the question. How red-pilled were you when you met her?
Yeah, look, I obviously I hate the term red pill. It's so cringeworthy, but based on the understanding that most people have of what that definition is, probably pretty, because I was in like the pickup artist stuff and, you know, everything that you basically see now, the PUAs we're all talking about, like around the turn of the millennia, like around the year 2000 and all of that stuff. So yeah, I had learned a bunch of this stuff in its basic form and then seen it working. So it's like, I only started the channel, like 5 years ago, but I've had these kind of thoughts and stuff like that since I was like 19. I first came across this stuff.
Beautiful. I can't believe it's been 5 years. It's amazing. I have 2 more questions for you, my friend. Are you ready for them?
Let's do it.
First one, if one of you died, would that person want the other to remarry?
Oh, yeah, of course.
Okay.
Well, I mean,
you guys have had this conversation.
I'm not sure I understand. Why wouldn't you want the other person to remarry?
As someone asked that, I'm assuming the reason why they're thinking is some kind of spiritual fidelity, some kind of, if we meet up in heaven, I don't want another wife or husband to have to meet up with us as well. You know, if people are extrapolating to the afterlife and they feel like, you know, not even till death do us part, it's like into the afterlife as well.
Oh god, like I don't want to see my partner dating another man or being married to another man. But if I'm dead, then I don't have to. I don't know if I believe in an afterlife. I just don't know. But I'm dead, so I don't care. You know, I don't have to deal with that personal jealousy, and so it's so easy to be like, no, I just want her to do whatever makes her happiest. You know, I love her.
Yeah, it's probably hard to be jealous when you're dead. That actually makes a lot of sense. Last question, and this one will be easy for you to answer, I suspect. Will we ever get to see either your girlfriend or your daughter on this channel?
No. No.
Some lines we don't cross.
Yeah, I'm an intensely private person. And this is an intense episode for me. You guys got a lot of details, and I don't plan on just talking about my relationship constantly. But when it comes up organically, I'll now sort of talk about it. But I know this might sound weird, but I think social media is dangerous. I think it's a really big deal to have your face just out there for everybody. I don't want to have my girlfriend's face or figure or her way of speaking scrutinized by strangers on the internet. I want to protect her from all of that. You know, it's probably one of the reasons why I've never done it before. I don't think she really minds, but then I also have a bit more of a sense of what it's actually like on social media. You know, I've done this for a while, so yeah, that's my choice primarily. I'd never want to do that. And I take a lot of home videos of my daughter. I just try and capture so much because it's all so precious. And when she goes to sleep, I watch videos of her. And yeah, when you love something so much and there's a joy that comes from it, there's a desire to share that. You're like, oh, I'm sure that 99.9% of my audience, I think you guys like me, and you'll be happy to know that I'm happy in my relationship and happy that I love my daughter and that, you know, things are going well for me in that regard. And so I imagine if I was to show you hey, this is my daughter, isn't she gorgeous? You know, isn't this wonderful? I'd probably get a really positive response, but there just feels something, it's too special to me to reduce to something that to get views or likes or comments about or something like that. It's, to me, my family is sacred and I need to keep it separate from what I'm doing online. This episode being the exception, for which reasons I've sort of explained. But yeah, sorry. You'll never see them. I mean, it's not like I used to do consultations and sometimes people would ask me and I'm like, no, here's my girlfriend. And I'd show them there and they could chat to her and stuff like that. I'm not crazy about it. It's just never probably on the public forum or whatever.
Yeah. The only way to meet them is to actually become a close personal friend of Alexander Grace.
Yeah. Yeah, that's probably it.
Well, it's a good method. I think it's entirely defensible. And it is really interesting that we have entire generations growing up. Literally the first picture of them is before they're out of the womb. They already have selfies. It's it's going to be interesting to see how these kids turn out in the next 20, 30, 40 years. We're going to find out.
Yeah, we're going to find out. I'm optimistic about my own daughter. I won't speak for the other generations. Now, I understand, just to finish up, you guys on Patreon, you asked me like a lot of questions. I think there were 70 or 80 questions in total. I know that we didn't get to all of them, but just rest assured, like these topics are going to come up in the course of the videos. All that information is coming. So please, stay tuned. It's all good. And just a reminder to you guys, thank you so much for watching all the way to the end. If you enjoyed it, this is the kind of content that we've been putting out in these episodes. I think they're really high quality. I love chatting to Matt. Like, I'm chatting with a friend, but we're also getting through a lot of information. If you know me at this stage, you know what I'm about, and you're enjoying it, you will like Patreon. I have a massive retention rate. People who sign up tend to stick around. There's a lot of loyalty into it because Patreon has been the place where I've been able to post a lot of the content that I'm really passionate about for a long time now. On YouTube, I have to be a little bit more careful choosing my topics, is what's going to have mainstream appeal. But the stuff that I think is really important, nitty gritty, that's what we get into on Patreon. And that's the kind of stuff that we're going to be discussing in these episodes. So I highly recommend, check it out.
I second that. It's a great space, and I'm happy that I get to be a small part of it now as well.
How long have you been a patron of mine, Matt?
I don't know, 3 years, something like that.
3 years. Yeah. No, that's cool. I remember the names of people who've been patrons for a long time. When they message me, I'm like, man, this guy's still here. That's fantastic. It's weird to develop those kind of relationships, but really, while YouTube is fun, you're still going to see like my clips and stuff. The community that we have on Patreon, these are, in my opinion, the really high quality people. They take this stuff seriously. The discussion section is always fascinating, and we have a much bigger representation of women on Patreon, and you see that in the comments section as well. So if you're curious what women think about my videos and actually have back and forth discussions on this stuff, you're going to see so much more of that on Patreon. So anyway, that's the end of my plug. Thank you so much, Matt, for joining me. I think that's the end of the episode. Anything else to say?
I have nothing left to say. I'm very happy with it. Thank you for all of your opening up about such an important part of your life. So many of us have been wondering this question for so many years. So well done.